Today I am beginning a brand new series by Kings and Generals. This one is called Sulla, Life and Battles, the Man Who Conquered Rome. Now, Sulla has appeared twice on this channel. The first time I remember him, or at least vaguely remember, is in the Julius Caesar series where I think it was Kings and Generals who mentioned Julius Caesar barely surviving one of his purges, or was lucky to survive Sulla, something like that. Or maybe it was someone else. I completely forgot, but I'm pretty sure it was Sulla, but if I'm wrong, we'll find out in this series. And the second time must have been in the Dova Hadi Unbiased History of Rome series, but that was such a long time ago, I completely forgot if he said anything about Sulla. So, yeah, overall, I can't really pretend that I'm that knowledgeable of Sulla. There's a lot of comparisons about the guy. Usually people compare him to Caesar, almost like he was a Caesar before Caesar, the man who took over Rome. I think he marched on Rome, I've heard. He's been called a tyrant, a dictator, so almost like, yeah, an image of like Caesar before Caesar. I'll see if what I've heard is correct in this series. If not, then we'll find out, won't we, today? And I chose this series because as of late I've been interested in
Mithridatic Wars.
So I'll explain that when we get there, but he is a prominent player in those wars. So I think that's kind of why I chose this series, because I kind of want to touch more on that. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than I should probably get into it. So if you enjoy, if you want to watch the original video by Kings and Generals, the link is down in the description down below. And if you enjoy my content and you want to help me out in any way, shape, or form, feel free to please like, comment, subscribe, and maybe consider becoming a Patreon member. It's only for $1 a month, and it would really help me out a lot. Now, with that said, and now without any further ado, let's do.
At the twilight of the Roman Republic, few figures loom larger or cast darker shadows than Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Born into a once proud but impoverished patrician family, Sulla's journey from obscurity to unmatched power is one of the most tumultuous, ruthless, and consequential sagas in Roman history. His life traverses a landscape of war, betrayal, political manipulation, and personal ambition, all set against the backdrop of a crumbling republic and the rising tensions that would ultimately birth an empire. This episode doesn't just recount Sulla's meteoric rise, it explores the deeper currents that carried him forward, and the foundations of Roman politics he shook to their core. From North Africa to Greece, from the Forum to the battlefield, Sulla shaped, and was shaped by, the most volatile moments of his time. Understanding Sulla's arc is essential to grasping how Rome transitioned from a senatorial republic to a stage where military strongmen would dominate. This is not just the story of one man, but of a republic on the brink, its traditions challenged, its laws rewritten, and its future forever altered. Welcome to the story of Sulla. Previously, in 138 BC, only 8 years after Carthage's final destruction, the protagonist of our story, Sulla, was born in Rome into a branch of the prestigious in their rear. In 138 BC, only 8 years after Carthage's final destruction, the protagonist of our story, Sulla, was born in Rome into a branch of the prestigious Cornelii gens. On the surface, his heritage would have guaranteed a privileged life, but unfortunately for Sulla, this wasn't the case. In contrast to many of the more fortunate Cornelii family lines, such as that of the Scipios, Sulla's offshoot was relatively destitute. At the time, none of his clan had risen above the rank of praetor for several generations. According to one tale which has come down to us, Sulla's wet nurse was carrying her young ward through the streets of Rome one day when she was approached by a mysterious woman. Upon seeing the child, the enigmatic figure spoke the words, "Pua tibi et republicae tue felix, the infant will be a source of felicity to you and the state." However, such predictions seemed far removed from Sulla's experiences as he grew into a young man, and by the time he came of age, his father died, leaving Sulla nothing and reducing him to inhabiting the same house as a slave. Lacking money and access to high society, Sulla, blessed with a mane of golden red hair and blue eyes, found friends among the vagrants of Roman society, actors, something that only decreased his standing in the eyes of the aristocrats. It was a stroke of pure luck that changed Sulla's fate. In a short period of time, both the youngster's mistress Nicopolis and his stepmother passed away, leaving him a substantial sum of money. Now a man of means, Sulla was duly elected quaestor for 107 BC, being assigned to the staff of consul Gaius Marius. Ongoing since 111 BC, the so-called Jugurthine War was Rome's desert Vietnam, exposing the absolute worst of Roman politics and the weaknesses of its military. Numidian ruler Jugurtha was avoiding retribution by bribing senators and assassinating rivals, while the legions were repeatedly ambushed by his guerrilla warriors familiar with the rugged terrain of the Maghreb. To rectify this situation, Marius launched an expedition into
That's really interesting. I've never heard of this war, so this is very interesting. And the Numidians, as we know, very powerful. It's interesting that the dynamic, there seems to be hostility, because like at the end of the Second Punic War, the Scipio Africanus was the one who made an alliance with the Numidians and managed to get Numidian riders into his army to, defeat Hannibal, I believe. But point is, he went to, the kingdom of Numidia and managed to, I'm pretty sure he helped it set the chain of events to put a pro-Roman ruler, if I'm remembering correctly. But either way, it's interesting now that apparently in between that time and now, Numidia and Rome gained new hostilities. Though I have to give it to the Numidians. They were a real cornerstone in Hannibal Barca's army and a big part of why he defeated Rome with the Numidian riders. And so it doesn't fully surprise me that they are kind of, being a thorn on Rome's side, especially if they have the home field advantage.
Africa, personally leading the main force, but leaving his deputy Sulla behind in Italy with the crucial task of assembling a large cavalry force. Evidently, the Greenhorn quaestor succeeded, and brought a force of riders to Marius in the spring of 106 BC. Sulla turned on his notorious charm immediately upon arrival, making soldiers, officers, and even Marius admire him. And as the war went on, the Romans eventually captured a fort near the river Meluccia, where most of Jugurtha's treasury was stored, only to be informed that Jugurtha had captured Cirta in their rear. Marching back, the Romans were confronted by the Numidians, recently joined by the Mauritanian king Bocchus I of Mauritania. The initial engagement with the two kings was an ambush, where Marius and Sulla were forced into forming a series of defensive circuits and weathering the hail of missiles, until evening forced the end of the confrontation. Unable to press battle into the night, Marius marched his soldiers out early and reached the Numidian camp at dawn, routing them at daybreak. Wary of further ambushes, Marius and Sulla pursued Jugurtha slowly, with their army formed in a defensive square, passing nearby Setif and proceeding to Cirta. The Second Battle of Cirta began when Jugurtha and Bocchus had recuperated from their defeat, leaving Cirta in an about-face and marching 4 large divisions, allegedly numbering 90,000 men, against Marius's army. Unsure what Jugurtha planned, Marius halted his army and prepared for battle on the open plains outside the city, giving Sulla command of the right wing. Jugurtha gave battle, with Bocchus and Volux appearing shortly after the beginning of the engagement at the Romans' rear, encircling them.
Oh my goodness, I was gonna say, they just got behind them, holy crap.
The Romans pressed from all sides. Jugurtha then held up his dripping sword, exclaiming that he had killed Marius himself. Thrown into confusion, the Roman army fell into disorder, except for Sulla, who managed to break Bocchus and the Mauritanians' line and drive them off, opening a gap for them to maneuver.
Oh snap.
Marius also restored order to his part of the line and was able to drive off the Jugurthine cavalry on the Roman left, allowing him and Sulla to perform a counter-encirclement against the Numidians.
Oh wow.
Losing, Jugurtha fled the field, and his army was routed. This victory made
Yeah, that was wild. Holy crap. They just, like, beat their way out of an encirclement. Like, they were surrounded. And goes to show you that the Romans, you're starting to see, like, prime Rome. I mean, I've been thinking about it. Like, when is Rome militarily in its prime? I guess that depends, because technically you could say the later armies of the Byzantines would be the prime of Rome due to just technology and advancements. I don't know, it's a debate, but you're starting to see the big discipline, because when we watch like the Julius Caesar series onwards, the Romans, no matter what bad situation they manage to find themselves in, no matter how outnumbered, their sheer discipline and ability to weather any storm, you're kind of seeing that right here in a great example. So that was beyond impressive. I thought they were done for. I thought that was a defeat right there, because I'm like, you're encircled, but now they fought their way back. So again, Rome was a different beast, man.
Jugurtha's allies, crucially his father-in-law, Bocchus I of Numidia, waver, so Marius sent Sulla to negotiate. The latter swiftly weaved his way into Bocchus's good graces, reassuring and instructing him as though he was a close counselor rather than an enemy ambassador. Real or manufactured, this diplomatic friendship allowed Sulla to end the war. Meeting in the middle of the desert, Bocchus promised both Sulla and Jugurtha that he would hand the other over, allowing the Mauritanian king to lean whichever way he wanted to. Lured by Sulla's promise of favorable terms, Jugurtha arrived for negotiations unarmed and was immediately seized by men jumping out of hiding.
Wow.
He was shackled and handed over to Sulla, who then gave him to Marius, whose jealousy at the plaudits earned by his subordinate triggered an enmity that lasted a lifetime.
I've heard Marius and Sulla had that there were hostilities. Like I said, I've heard Sulla compared to Caesar, and I think I could have sworn I've heard it said like Marius and Sulla were like Caesar and Pompey. So if what I heard is correct, I'm almost expecting these two to come to blows. I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm coming into this very ignorant and very blind, but that's kind of what I'm thinking it's gonna happen if what I've heard is true. And dang, that ploy, yeah, I could see why. I mean, look at Sulla, his charisma, his competence. This is a man to be feared, you know? And what's the rule we always talk about? We brought it up a few times. You never outshine your superiors, right? Because you then become a threat, or you then become a rival. And we see that plenty of times in history where a subordinate will do too well, and then their superior will kind of be like, start getting suspicious. And yeah, that dude just cleaned that whole situation up through sheer diplomatic chops and charm. So yeah, I think Marius is completely right to be like, yeah, this guy, he's gonna be a rival, you know?
With the war in Africa concluded, the Marian army was called back to Italy to fight an invasion of Germanic tribes in the Cimbrian War. Sulla wasted no time in employing his well-renowned magnetism to split the Germanic Marsi tribe off from their kin and persuade them to become allies of Rome, a great diplomatic boon to the cause.
Playing on iPhone? Now you can play unlocked with Google Play Games on PC.
Realizing Marius's shadow would always veil his achievements, Sulla went to serve Rome's other consul, Catullus, in the hopes that military acclaim of his own would quicken his ascent. In 101 BC, Sulla remedied a supply shortage among Catullus's troops so effectively that not only was he able to feed Catullus's armies, but Marius's soldiers as well, causing Marius's jealousy to flare up once again.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks to Marius's politically motivated deployment, Sulla was relegated to a relatively minor role in the final Roman victory of the Cimbrian War at Vercellae. After this, Sulla returned to Rome, and his political career began in earnest. 98 BC, however, saw the ambitious noble fail to gain the praetorship due to basing his campaign on his military achievements as a junior officer. Sulla learned his lesson and won next year through bribes and cynically telling voters what they wanted to hear.
He finally learned how to politic. Alright, just make promises and bribe. Good job, Sulla. You've learned the game of politics. And yeah, we're starting to already see the guy adapts quick, doesn't he? He competent and efficient.
As urban praetor, he had a century's worth of exotic lions sent from his royal contact Bocchus for display at the Apollonian Games, gaining immense popularity, which only further inflamed Marius's ire. According to the source,
freaking Marius, bro. Just everything this guy does, he keeps succeeding, and just Marius just keeps like getting more and more pissed off each time. Oh boy.
Sulla's term ended hastily when he was sent to deal with the pirate-infested province of Cilicia as pro-praetor. However, the pirate issue soon took a back seat to the larger struggle that was taking shape in Asia Minor between Rome and the Kingdom of Pontus, led by Mithridates VI.
Mithridates. This is the Poison King, right? That's what he's called? I believe this is the guy who fought there were 3, I believe, of these wars, and he was the leader of Pontus. He comes from a family that actually claimed to be heralded from Darius or have some type of tie to him, but also Pontus was Hellenistic, you know, Greek inspired and whatnot. The reason I picked this series and why I'm kind of a bit aware of this is because I played this game called Total War Rome 2. I've been playing since January of this year, and I've kind of been playing as all the Hellenistic tribes. I played as Macedon, I played as the Seleucid Empire, I played as Ptolemaic Egypt, and in my newest, I played as Epirus too, and in my newest playthrough at the moment, I played as Pontus, and I wanted to try to recreate. Every time I played a grand campaign, I tried to get the borders of each kingdom at their height, and I looked at a map from Pontus. Let me show you. Wait, Kingdom of Pontus at its peak. So this is the map that I found of the Kingdom of Pontus at its peak, and this is what I created in my game, and then I just play with this. And so this indirectly led me to learning about these wars and kind of reading about Sulla, and basically him being a big part of winning the first war. I don't know about the second two, but Sulla was definitely the guy who battled the Poison King and drove him out of Greece. So this is really fun. And I have to say, playing as Pontus has been hard, because yeah, I took Anatolia and here, but I've been surrounded on both sides by Celtic tribes and by the desert tribes, and so like I'm getting the Byzantine experience as I'm trying to hold on to Anatolia while fighting 2 sides. Like it's been the hardest playthrough of my life, holding on to all of this in the game. I've managed to pull it off, but it's super hard. So all this to tell you is why I'm watching this series right now, because of my Total War Rome 2 gaming adventures.
Since 114 BC, Mithridates had expanded Pontic rule across Anatolia, and in doing so...
Yeah, and if this is the same guy, he's called the Poison King, because apparently, legend has it, is that he apparently digested poison in order to build an immunity to it, or that was just a consequence of it, so that's why he's called the Poison King, which I think is just an awesome title, by the way. Like, just being called the Poison King, like... and he's also famously another rival of the late Roman Republic.
Attracted the wary gaze of the Roman Republic. By the time Sulla arrived to take up his magistracy in 96, Mithridates had managed to drive out or slay 2 Cappadocian kings. Installed in their place was a son of the Pontic king, and when the Romans ordered that puppet to get out, Mithridates appointed an apparently rogue regent known as Gordius, who was almost certainly still acting in the king's name. Almost instantly after the propraetor arrived, he received orders to take his meager forces and kick the Mithridatic stooge out of Cappadocia for good. Despite possessing inadequate forces for the job, Sulla took his small army, reinforced it with allies from the cities of Asia Minor, and embarked on a campaign. It is one of history's great disappointments that we have little detail concerning what was almost certainly one of Sulla's greatest military achievements. However, what we do know is that by using a combination of military skill and diplomatic trickery in the rough Cappadocian land, the propraetor threw Gordius out with his motley force and put the previously deposed king, Ariobarzanes, back on his throne. In the aftermath, Sulla was not only declared imperator by his men, but reached the Euphrates River and received the first ever embassy from the rising Parthian Empire to the rising Roman one.
Oh wow.
Again, the propraetor asserted his and his republic's superiority in the typical tactless Roman style. He brought 3 chairs to the meeting, seating himself in the center, whilst both the Cappadocian and Parthian emissaries were forced to the left and right. This meeting was ultimately successful for Sulla in a diplomatic sense, resulting in a treaty of friendship between the two great powers. But he'd also asserted Rome's symbolic authority. Rome sat at the center of affairs, directing the trifling Parthians as easily as it controlled the kinglet of Cappadocia.
Yeah, this is what you call a power move, what he's doing right here. It's like when you sit in the head of the table, right? It's like, yeah, I'm the one in charge, I'm the main character here.
When the Parthian king learned of the insult, his diplomat was executed for allowing it. Nothing further of note happened for the remainder of Sulla's time as governor, and even the amount of time itself isn't known for certain. But by 93 BC, his assignment was over, and he was making his way back to Rome. Now his career as a great man could begin in earnest. Just as the rising starlet was about to take the next step in his career, however, the tribune Livilius Drusus, initially supported by Sulla due to his desire for a strong senate, was assassinated in 91 for backing citizenship for Rome's Italian allies.
Ooh.
With that murder, the Republic descended into a self-inflicted civil war of terrible scale, the Social War, and the rising Sulla was called upon to fight in the ensuing conflict alongside his hardline political rivals, such as the popular darling Marius. As Romans and their former comrades in arms fought and slew one another on 2 different fronts, Sulla gradually became a hero. At the outbreak of the war, Sulla was appointed a legate under Marius himself, the two working together despite their supposed enmity. In 91 BCE, Sulla and Marius were attacked by the Marsi and Marrucini after they had inflicted a series of defeats against the Romans, but Marius and his protege managed to drive them off, pursuing them into a vineyard. The cornered Marsi engaged Marius, but were driven back, and forced to escape over the walls of the vineyard, where they took considerable losses. Having anticipated their escape, Sulla outmaneuvered them and intercepted the fleeing Marsi on the other side of the enclosed vineyard, killing 6,000 and capturing a great deal of arms and armor. This proved the first Roman victory of the conflict, right at the close of the campaigning season, bringing a desperately needed boost to Roman morale on Sulla's behalf. After the battle, Marius dispatched Sulla to relieve the besieged city of Acernia, but he would not arrive in time to halt Samnite forces besieging the city in 90 BCE. In the opening of that year, they had already defeated a Roman force under the consul L. Julius Caesar, and the Samnites under Duilius had anticipated his arrival. In one of the narrow defiles approaching the city, Sulla's 24-cohort-strong force was ambushed by the Samnites as he passed through the gully, and he appealed to Duilius for a truce to discuss terms. The Samnites, believing they had the upper hand, let their guard down through the night as they prepared to parley with Sulla, a situation in which he quickly rose to the occasion. Using the cover of night to hide his army, he ordered the Cornicans to continue sounding the watches in the Roman camp, leaving it intact, but marching his forces, their baggage and the artillery out and around Duilius's force until the 4th watch, when the skeleton crew of trumpeters scurried after him. Duilius's men were left confounded and bewildered, although the sources become confused after this. Did Sulla alleviate the siege of Acernia and defeat Duilius, or was he forced to withdraw? Sadly, we may never know. However, Sulla distinguishing himself in the first years of the conflict propelled him to new heights, ultimately resulting in his appointment as proconsul following the death of Cato in 89 BCE, and being given command of an army for the campaign against the Samnites. Unlike his predecessor Caesar, Sulla quickly gained a series of successes in Campania against the Italic rebels, recapturing Strabiae and laying siege to Pompeii. Evidently, the siege wore on the soldiers, who grew tired of the arrogance of the legate and former consul Postumius Albinus stoning him to death.
Oh, holy
Sulla
crap.
acted decisively to resolve the situation. Countermanding the wishes of some officers who wished to have the mutineers viciously punished, Sulla recognized the need to keep solidarity during the war, and particularly the siege at Pompeii. Instead of acting draconian, Sulla took advantage of the inevitable remorse felt by the soldiery, simply informing him that he expected reparations in the form of greater courage and doggedness during their coming battles.
Alright, so let me give my impressions so far of the man. I mean, you know, like I said, what I've heard about him, tyrannical, a dictator, definitely the image of what I've heard about Sulla is definitely, like I said, like Julius Caesar before Julius Caesar, but also like someone who I was like thinking a lot more bloody and brutal. But so far, and I know this is just the early career, there's still time for a lot to happen, but you know, early career Sulla, very diplomatic in a way I was not expecting, but makes sense, you know, like, maybe he might have a 180 once he gets enough power and doesn't have to be as diplomatic, but so far, yeah, I am surprised to see the very big diplomatic side of him, using diplomacy a lot, and that seems to be his greatest strength so far. Like, he is competent on the battlefield, but it seems like a lot of his bigger achievements, it's just him playing, yeah, the diplomatic game. He's actually incredibly good at it, that skill, and able to, like, get people to agree with him, work with him, cooperate with him. So I would attribute the word diplomatic to him. That seems to be his greatest strength and skill at the moment. And yeah, like I said, I mean, there's still plenty of time. Like, maybe later he'll just be like, I have so much power, I don't have to play nice anymore, and then just go do a 180 and become more brutal. But yeah, so far, early career Sulla, diplomatic, charismatic, and competent.
The soldiers would soon have their opportunity, as the Samnite army under Cluentius approached via nearby Nola and encamped less than half a mile from Sulla, provoking him into a rash first assault. Sulla was quickly driven off, but waited for his foraging parties to return and then made a second attempt on Cluentius, which succeeded and forced him to move his camp. Cluentius then awaited his own reinforcements in the form of a large force of Gallic defectors, formerly in Roman service. The two men formed up their armies for a set-piece battle, and as they came within a few hundred meters of each other, allegedly a Gaul of enormous size sallied forth from Cluentius's army, challenging any of the Romans to single combat. The challenge was then received and accepted by a Mauritanian man of short stature, who killed the Gaul and caused the whole Gallic contingent to desert in a panic.
Oh,
This
wow.
triggered the rest of Cluentius's force to break and flee the battlefield back to Nola in disorder.
Dang. Wow. That was a real David and Goliath moment right there.
With Sulla slaying 3,000 in the pursuit, and allegedly another 20,000 up against the walls of Nola, including Cluentius himself. After this, Pompey and Herculaneum quickly succumbed to Sulla's forces, who then moved on the nation of the Herpini and their stronghold of Aquilanum. Aquilanum had been one of the instigators and staunchest supporters of the rebel cause, and was thusly punished by Sulla, sacking and setting fire to the town. This example quickly brought about the surrender of other nearby towns, and the whole of the Herpini rebels were quickly brought to heel by Sulla, reversing the severe defeats of the prior years of the war. With dash and ability, the legate then turned and unexpectedly invaded northern Samnium, leading his forces through the mountains and evading an attempted interception by the Samnite general Mutilus. He was able to weave through the passes of the Apennines and outflank Mutilus, surprising his forces in an ambush from the other side, scattering them and driving the wounded Mutilus to Acernia. His quick capture of Bovianum and the Samnite council was a decisive blow in ending the conflict, and his rapid military successes had brought Sulla out of Marius's shadow.
Wow.
Unlike his exploits against the Germans, this laundry list of military triumphs closer to home skyrocketed Sulla to the apex of Roman society. Still shimmering with the freshly won glory of his victories, the once destitute friend of actors put himself forward for the consulship, and won by an absolute landslide, swept.
Dang. We're only 17 minutes in and he's already gone from nobody to the hero of Rome. Wow.
Into office by a grateful and awestruck populace. 88 BC was to be his year, during which Sulla would carve his name into history. He would eventually do just that, but in a manner far distinct from what he expected. The new consul wed his son to the daughter of his colleague and political ally Quintus Pompeius Rufus. Not satisfied with just one marriage alliance, Sulla himself controversially married a scion of the ancient and powerful Metelli family. Secure in his friendships, the prime consul would proceed in conducting state business and acquiring the year's true prize, supreme command in a full-scale war against Mithridates VI. Previously seen as only a minor annoyance, the shrewd king of Pontus had taken advantage of Rome's civil strife-induced paralysis to expand without consequence. When the enfeebled Romans sent Manius Aquilius to threaten Mithridates into submission, he was instead defeated, captured, and executed by having molten gold poured down his throat.
Oh my
By the time
gosh.
Sulla took up his consulship, this incoming Eastern command, and its sure promise of dignitas aplenty, was the talk of the town. Motivated by this desire for wealth and greatness, the Republic's grandees would tear each other and Rome apart to get it, particularly Sulla and his old mentor, the aging Gaius Marius. Boundlessly envious of the rising sun that was Lucius Cornelius Sulla, the setting son of Marius found common cause with a radical tribune of 88 BC known as Sulpicius. Previously a Sullan ally, Sulpicius had found the consul unwilling to implement his legislation, and so went to Marius in hopes of using the man's great name as a weapon. In return for Marius's help, though, the aging general required Sulpicius use his power as tribune to transfer the Mithridatic command and all its accompanying boons to him. When Sulla, as of yet unaware of the plan to deprive him, responded by declaring a suspension of public business in order to give himself time to speak with the people, Sulpicius initiated a bout of rioting throughout the city. Blindsided by bitter factional violence, which left his co-consul's son dead on the streets of Rome, Sulla was forced to take refuge with his loyal army, who were in the process of stamping out the social war's last embers. Taking advantage of Sulla's absence, Sulpicius went on a legislative rampage, implementing a number of measures which included fully enfranchising the Italian allies. Then, running hot with success, the tribune snatched the Mithridatic command away from Sulla and handed it to Marius.
Oh,
When
wow.
Sulla found out about this sleight of hand, he was utterly furious, realizing he had been backed into a corner and threatened with humiliation and political death.
Dang, this is quite the game of politics right there. Marius. Yeah, all this building resentment. I'm wondering how this is gonna go. Are they gonna have to, like, straight up try to kill each other? Or is this gonna be just a political death situation? I heard Sulla marched on Rome. To what degree, I don't know, and I could have sworn I heard purges relating to him, so I'm going off by bits and pieces I've heard. I'm guessing he might try to just wipe out all opposition, maybe in a bloody way. I'm not sure though, but yeah, this is quite the dangerous game that these two are playing. This is definitely, it's leading me to thinking this is gonna have to end in a bloody way. I could be wrong, but yeah, that's kind of the vibe I'm starting to get with this growing hostilities.
So, Sulla did the unthinkable. He incited his rank-and-file legionaries with complaints of the Marians' behavior, implying that the old general would strip them of the opportunity for Pontic plunder. The soldiery was so dead-set loyal to their magnetic commander that when Marius sent military tribunes to seize the army, they were promptly stoned to death. However, upon realizing that Sulla was intending an unprecedented march on Rome, most of his officers deserted. Nevertheless, the consul was confident and desperate, and so continued his fateful advance on the barely defended capital with 6 full legions.
Holy
When
crap.
panicked senatorial emissaries came to ask the general why he was moving on his own city, Sulla simply replied that he planned to free it from tyrants. To his view anyway, the consul did just that. When the army finally arrived, it fought a vicious urban battle against a hastily organized Marian force. This move was completely unexpected, as Rome had little to defend itself with. Sulla's plan was to send Pompeius Rufus to breach the Colline Gate in the north, and 2 more legions to take the Caelimontanna Gate and Pons Sublicius Gate on the southeast and southwest sides of the city in a 3-pronged assault. Sulla himself would march through the Esquiline Gate, all his troops converging in the center of the city. Sulla's detachment, led by Lucius Basilius and Caius Mummius, quickly seized the gatehouse and the walls, and his soldiers advanced into the city before them. Marius had arranged for a furious defense by the city's citizens, who threw terracotta roof tiles, stones, and other heavy projectiles at the legionnaires below. The legionnaires were forced up against the walls of the shops and apartment blocks, unable to advance, when Sulla and his men arrived and responded by setting the houses ablaze. They continued up the streets to the Esquiline Hill, where Sulpicius's personal retinue was waiting. There, the soldiers clashed in an uphill battle, and Sulla's men were wavering. Sensing the urgency of the situation, Sulla grabbed the Aquila and pushed through to the front rank, and castigated them if they should abandon their standards, rallying the men to hold the line. He then ordered a reserve legion to go through the Viminalis Gate and take the Subura near the city center, outflanking Sulpicius.
Ooh, the flank. The oldest trick in the book. I see you, Sulla. Oh, yeah, this wasn't good writing for Marius, at least the situation, because apparently, yeah, this is unprecedented. You know, this whole action by Sulla, so defending Rome is something that they haven't had to do like this, so the fact that he had to hastily rally all these people and do that, yeah, things just did not seem well for Marius by those factors. But still, even then, he was doing incredibly well until this moment, huh?
Sulpicius's forces. Desperate, Marius and Sulpicius retreated back to the Temple of Tellus on the Oppian Hill, beseeching the slaves of the city to take up the fight in exchange for freedom. However, the citizens and the enslaved were already deserting the defense, and with no other options, Marius and his supporters fled the city. Marius, for his part, managed to escape the clutches of his rival, and went into exile all the way to Africa. Sulpicius, however, wasn't so lucky. Betrayed by a slave and discovered by sullen troops in a villa near Rome, the tribune was executed, his head sent to the consul, and all his laws annulled.
Wow.
However, as though to show Sulla's conservative and even-handed nature, the consul freed the slave as a reward, and then had him thrown from the Tarpeian Rock for betraying his master. Order had to be maintained after all.
Dang.
Having secured the city with his legionary army, Sulla attempted to right what he saw to be the Republic's terrible problem, the tribunes, who he considered to be out of control. To that end, legislation that favored the Senate was passed, which restored to that reverent body sole authority to enact new laws, while the power of the people's tribune was diminished. As Appian phrased it, voting would be controlled by the rich and wise, not the poor and headstrong. With the problem apparently sorted out, Sulla sent his army back to Nola and didn't interfere with the next year's elections. But his unseemly attack on Rome had scarred the consul's popularity so badly that a Marian-aligned politician, Cinna, became consul at the start of 87.
Dang.
Soon after, Sulla left Rome as proconsul and departed for the east, successful in his ultimate desire to win the command. Since the Pontic king's gilded execution of Manius Aquilius and Rome's subsequent distraction with its own civil turmoil, the Mithridates situation had flared from an ember into an inferno. Almost all of Asia Minor and its wealthy Greek cities were in thrall to him, and the slaughter of perhaps 80,000 Romans and Italians in the region had only bound the locals even more closely to his.
Holy crap. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's going ham right here. They're just, yeah, taking most of Anatolia.
Anti-Roman cause. By the time Sulla docked at Dyrrhachium with 5 veteran legions in 87 BC, Pontic allied Thracian tribes were causing issues for Roman forces in Macedonia. Meanwhile, Mithridates' best general, Archelaus, was heavily fortified in the Athenian harbour at Piraeus, while a third Pontic army was preparing to hook through Thrace and bear down on the Romans from above. Perhaps because his ascendant political enemies in Rome were cutting off his financial support, Sulla began an advance on Athens first. Not only would securing the most symbolically important city destroy a major Pontic inroad into Greece and shower the general with dignitas, but the plunder upon its seizure might serve as pay, which would serve to keep his veteran legionaries loyal for the foreseeable future.
Smart.
Sulla was so confident on arrival that he only
Okay, that's really smart though. Like, he's seeing the situation, things at Rome are starting to... He has problems now due to his march, and there's more opposition at home towards him now. And yeah, he needs to worry about the pay, the prestige. So very smart for him to go straight for Athens first for all those reasons.
left a portion of his army to besiege Athens proper, disconnected from the sea as it was, while he himself launched an immediate assault on the 50-foot-high stone walls of Piraeus. Contrary to expectation, however, the Pontic defenders gave a good account of themselves, inflicting significant casualties, despite taking many in return. After a painful and ultimately unsuccessful first clash, Sulla's forces were repelled and withdrew to Eleusis. The general's pride was dented deeply enough by this initial setback, and salt was rubbed in the wound when the Mithridatic sympathizing tyrant Aristean and all his Athenians began outright mocking Sulla's sun-blemished complexion by chanting "Syllabub, syllabub, mulberry crumble." With these continuous insults buoying his determination, Sulla began chopping down Athens' legendary philosophers' groves and using the timber to construct proper siege engines. Further machines, such as catapults and huge towers, were requisitioned from a newly acquiescent Thebes, and the dejected soldiers of the prior escalade were ordered to break the 400-year-old long walls and use the stone to build siege mounds. According to Frontius, Sulla gave them this tedious task so that by the time another assault was ready to be mounted, the men were positively raring to execute it, if only to get out of the mind-numbing drudgery.
That is so smart. I have to give it. He knows how to read people. That's another great thing about Sulla. Like, he knows how to read a room and in a sense get people to do what he wants any way, shape, or form. And this is smart. Like, I'm gonna make you guys do something so boring that killing yourselves in another assault will seem fun by comparison. That's awesome. He's very socially intelligent.
Archelaus received fresh reinforcements from his garrisons at Chalcis and on other previously captured islands, then subsequently in the form of a fresh force sent by Mithridates himself. Still, persistent betrayal by slaves in Piraeus repeatedly allowed Sulla to ambush Archelaus' Sally forces and resupply caravans heading to Athens, a once vibrant city which was succumbing to famine with disconcerting speed. Eventually coming to suspect that turncoats were alerting the Romans to his plans, Archelaus countered Sulla with an intelligent sleight of hand. That night he sent another caravan of supplies towards Athens, which was duly predicted, ambushed and destroyed. However, that sacrifice also allowed the Pontic general to send out soldiers armed with flaming torches, who raised some of the unprotected Roman siege weapons.
Wow.
Fighting and famine within Athens intensified until the citizens began acting against Aristean, for whom
Okay, that was really smart there.
Sulla had developed an intense personal hatred. The tyrant was eventually forced to send envoys in order to make peace with the Roman general. When they got there though, the emissaries immediately began by pontificating about Athens' old glories and spouting rhetoric which Sulla was in no mood to hear. Interrupting Aristean's blustering emissaries in a most uncouth and utterly barbaric manner, to the oh-so-sophisticated Greeks at least, Sulla exclaimed, "My friends, you can pack your speeches and be off. Rome did not send me to Athens to study ancient history. My task is to subdue rebels."
Holy crap. That's like so Athens though. Like, they send these ambassadors and they're just gonna be talking about, let me tell you about the greatness of Athens and our contributions to civilizations. Like, bro. You know, I still can't get over. I remember when we were looking at the Peloponnesian War, and then just the speeches that the Athenian like ambassadors would give and stuff. It's like, oh my goodness, just get to the point, dude.
It was not long after that that Sulla found a way into the city and stormed it, allowing his soldiers to sack and pillage Athens in a massacre that was committed to folk memory thereafter. In the wake of Athens' fall, Archelaus raised anchor and sailed away from Piraeus to rendezvous with other Pontic forces at Thermopylae, allowing Sulla to capture the coastal fortress in spring of 86 BC. Free from his months-old siege, the Roman commander advanced into Boeotia to continue his campaign against Pontus. After routinely absorbing the 6,000-strong vanguard of a replacement army sent by his pro-Marian rival Cinna into his own army, with barely a hint of effort, Sulla resumed his pursuit of Archelaus' army. The two forces encountered one another north of the iconic city of Chaeronea. It was a bad situation for the Romans. Finding the level ground unsuitable against such an overwhelming cavalry-heavy force, Sulla declined battle when offered and weaved his way south, beating a Pontic force to occupy the strategic Acropolis of Parapetami. When Archelaus sent another contingent to take Chaeronea itself, Sullan forces again beat them to it, leading the unsuccessful force to take up a new fortified position on Mount Thurium. Meanwhile, the colossal Pontic army set up temporary quarters in a valley where Mount Ocontium in the northwest and Mount Hedilium in the northeast almost met. The river Kephissus flowed through this gorge, forming the left flank of Archelaus' army, and the right flank of Sulla's 30,000. Never one to pass off an opportunity, when a group of Chaeronean citizens offered to hit the Pontic forces on Thurium from behind, Sulla accepted eagerly.
Wow. Okay, let's see how this plays
The battle
out.
began with Sulla's apparent retreat, marching away from Mount Thurium alongside the Kephissus while leaving Gabinius to defend the city of Chaeronea and Murena on Mount Thurium. In response, Archelaus extended his line, detaching a flanking force to assault Murena's troops on Mount Thurium. Sulla performed an about-face and linked up with Gabinius' forces at Chaeronea, extending his own line across the valley. Already by this point, Archelaus' flanking force was engaging the untenable position of Murena, who then launched his counterattack with the locals. Using their knowledge of the local terrain, the Chaeronean forces managed to surprise, surround, and crush Archelaus' force on Thurium. Worse still, their flight into the plain below was met by a prearranged cavalry attack from one of Sulla's sub-commanders,
Wow.
resulting in even greater casualties and utter panic in the Pontic army. Seeing the jugular exposed, Sulla sounded an advance to begin the battle in haste. Archelaus responded in kind.
This whole event, I like how Sulla isn't afraid to play dirty in a sense. Like earlier with the Numidian stuff, like, you know, using the pretext of negotiation but then committing sneak attacks or just getting you know, trapping enemy leaders. Like, he definitely isn't afraid. He's pragmatic in a sense, in that sense. And I guess, yeah, I so far he's not afraid to play dirty. I'm not sure if you would count that specific instance as dirty, but you get what I mean, right? He's not above trickery or like anything to get the upper hand is the reading I'm getting, which is definitely interesting because I said, you know, there's a real shift with the Romans. You think of the earlier Romans where they would kind of look down on stuff like this, right? Like having treaties and capturing people, you know, the best example is like when Pyrrhus of Epirus fought the Romans. Like, there was a time where one of Pyrrhus's physicians offered the Roman ambassador, like, oh, hey, I'll assassinate Pyrrhus for you, and then the Roman ambassador just told Pyrrhus, like, stuff like that. You know, like, the Romans, the older generation of Romans were very much like honor bound and like, no, we won't use trickery or like playing underhanded tactics or playing dirty, we'll just beat you fair and square. But it was around the conquest of Greece where that kind of was lost. The Romans lost that old way of doing things, because they weren't above, like during the later conquest of Greece, they weren't above like lying to the Greeks. There was an instance where they were under the pretext of negotiating, but while actually assembling an army to get the Greeks off guard. So it was around that time that the Romans shifted and they never returned back to their old ways. You know what I mean? The idea of playing dirty, and I feel like Sulla is kind of a good example of that. And this isn't to say that that I'm looking down on him. No, just I do think he's very pragmatic, and he isn't above like using a little bit of trickery, cunning, cleverness to achieve his goals, you know? Or being a little underhanded is all I'm saying.
But found his vanguard force of 90 scythed chariots unable to charge properly due to the oversaturation of friendly soldiers in their path. Coolly observing the enemy chariots' sluggish approach, there was no panic in Sulla's solid ranks.
Oh my gosh.
Gabinius and his forces, stationed in the center, were able to withdraw in time behind stakes they had prepared in advance, killing the horses of the first few chariots and stymieing the remainder.
You know, the chariots stopped being like vital to armies. Like you think of like when the chariots were like necessity in armies. That was definitely the Bronze Age. Like, after the Bronze Age collapsed, the chariot kind of was never as important ever again to war. And, oftentimes, it can even be a hindrance. Like, even around this time, I think of the Seleucid Empire, when, you know, when Antiochus III had his war against the Romans, and then he was using Scythe's chariots on his left wing in the Battle of Magnesia, and often many people have criticized him for that, thinking like Scythe's chariots at this point in history were kind of a gimmick and more of a hindrance than an actual vital part of armies. Like I said, the chariot kind of lost its peak after the Bronze Age collapse, and so like it is. You see examples like this, like a big part of why Magnesia was lost is because, and why people have criticized that battle is like him using the chariots at all. Yeah, at this point in history, they're not what they used to be, like pre-Bronze Age collapse. So I found that funny that they were actually using this unironically, the chariot. Apparently it's a big opening attack. I will say though, when I'm playing Total War Rome 2, I have used the Scythe Chariot a few times, and it is kind of fun to use, but like it's only fun in a way when you're attacking routing armies, or you get behind them and attack. Like a frontal assault with Scythe Chariots are kind of destroyed really easily in the game, and I feel like that's pretty accurate to real life, you know? At this point in history, yeah, they're kind of just a gimmick. They're not what they used to be, you know?
At a command, javeliniers threw their ranged weapons and put an end to Archelaus' misused shock weapon. As a mark of their victory, and to taunt the defeated, Sulla's legionaries clapped their hands, laughing and shouting as if entertained by the spectacle. They wanted more of the same, to the dismay of their opponents.
Oh my gosh.
With his flanks intelligently anchored by mountainous terrain on...
Yeah, the Pontus forces are just, their morale is being shattered right before their eyes. Everything so far, this has been the worst opening for them.
Either side, Sulla closed in on the enemy army. His forces advanced from the entrenchments fortifying their position, which disrupted and stalled Archelaus' phalanx. To the indignant fury of the free Romans, Archelaus had put a force of freed slaves in the first line.
Oh wow.
Knowing their only option was to fight or suffer worse at Roman hands, they put up determined resistance. The Romans, incensed by their foe, also fought furiously, knocking aside the pikes or grabbing and wrenching them out of their enemies' hands.
Holy
the battle
crap.
had come to a relative stalemate in the center, with Archelaus' main line struggling to advance against both the determined Romans and their disruptive fortifications, supported by anti-personnel artillery, while the Romans struggled to break up the phalanxes pushing against their position. Now that Archelaus' locked phalanx was serving as the anvil onto which the Roman legions would hopefully be hammered and destroyed.
Yeah, I think like I said, Pontus was Hellenistic, and I think they still did use the Alexandrian tactics, right, of the pikes, the phalanx, and whatnot. But at this point, the phalanx, the Romans are already masters of defeating Alexander tactics. Like, they've already defeated the Macedonians, the Greeks, the Seleucids, basically, you know. So it is interesting that they're still kind of contending with this even to now. And I've already gone over why the phalanx compared to the legionary has kind of faltered, because the phalanx is so stiff. It requires the flanks to be properly secured. It's not adaptable or flexible on the battlefield. It's a part of a combined arms thing. And it needs proper ground conditions to be met in order to effectively work, such as the ground being even, again, the flanks being secured. So there's a lot to it. Meanwhile, the Roman legion, by comparison, is more flexible, adaptable, and doesn't need as many conditions as a phalanx. So often a big reason as to why the phalanx lost against the legionaries. Which makes me sad, because I'm a huge fan of pikes. Pikes are my favorite weapon. The phalanx is my favorite battle formation. So to see it lose is definitely something that broke my heart in the Roman conquest of the Greeks. But yeah, this is usually my tactics in Total War Rome too. I just like have a long line of phalanxes, and then I have my cavalry on the wings, and once the enemy is committed, I just send my cavalry around and just hammer and anvil everything. Like, honestly.
The Pontic general began executing that hammer blow. Using his superior numbers, Archelaus extended his right flank and attempted to envelop the Roman line on that side. Hortensius's reserve cohorts on that wing marched to outmaneuver the assault, but they were charged by Archelaus's personal cavalry contingent. Split away from the main army and forced to take refuge in the Thurium foothills, they gradually became encircled. Having positioned himself on the flank at Hedilium before the battle, Sulla quickly dispatched spare forces from whatever source he could, and then personally went to the aid of his left wing, traversing the entire length of the battle line to do so.
Dang. This might be the moment where the tides turn, because Archelaus has committed everything. Sulla being left with any reserve, you could see, I imagine he's gonna crash, and that's gonna probably lead to a victory, I'd imagine.
By that time, the crushing impetus of Archelaus' charge had been blunted. So, witnessing the dust storm which heralded Sulla's approach, the Mithridatic general slyly disengaged and slipped away, galloping towards the wing from which his adversary had just come.
Oh wow. Very smart on Archelaus. I was expecting Sulla to crash on him and then destroy him right there, but Archelaus ain't really that dumb. He's kind of shrewd in his own way. That's very smart of him to see that and pull out quickly.
Now sensing trouble on both wings, Sulla and his reinforcements stopped. The commander briefly stumped about where to go. With considerable decisiveness, given the gravity of the situation, Sulla detached 4 cohorts to stabilize the left flank against the assault of Archelaus' commander Texeles, while riding to take on Archelaus himself with the remaining one.
Dang. Oh, they've all committed. I thought Archelaus thing, he just moved around. He's like, alright, let me go around now. Okay, they've all committed now, it seems. It doesn't seem like each side has a reserve now. So I guess now it comes down to who's just gonna outfight who.
In the meantime, the Pontic general had arrived and equalized the wing, although Roman forces continued to push relentlessly. But when the inexorable Sulla arrived and engaged with his overwhelming morale-boosting presence and one fresh cohort of men, the superior quality Roman soldiers broke Archelaus' left without delay. His men lost their cohesion and fled in the direction of their camp near Mount Acontium or towards the river Cephisus. As this was happening, and perhaps because of it, the other Pontic wing near Mount Thurium collapsed before Sulla could send any aid, followed by the center. On both flanks, thousands of barbarian troops, as Plutarch calls them, were slain as they fled. The Pontic commander known as Texeles was captured by the triumphant Roman army amid the chaos, But Archelaus, and only about 10,000 men comprising the battered remnant of his forces, managed to escape to Chalcis. As a mark of his victory, Sulla erected 2 monuments in the area, the remains of one of which was discovered in the 1990s atop Mount Thurium.
Oh, wow.
The battle may have been won for the Romans, but neither the state's war nor Sulla's political war were over yet. News of the disaster the king Mithridates had suffered at Chaeronea came down on Asia Minor like a ton of bricks, and cities bound inexorably to Mithridates VI by blood, such as Ephesus, Pergamon, and a slew of others, were suddenly causing the king of Pontus problems. He dealt with such rumblings with merciless efficiency. For example, when the Tetrarch leadership of Galatia seemed as though its loyalty was wavering, Mithridates invited them to a banquet and had them all massacred.
Holy crap, dude.
That it was growing on.
Although
You know, it's funny, because when I'm playing Pontus, like, in Total War Rome 2, I actually do the exact same thing. Like, you know when they give you prompts, right? And then they're like, I don't know, ambassadors come, do you want to talk or meet with them, put them away? There's always an option with Pontus that says kill them anyways. I always just pick that one. So, I'm starting to maybe understand why that's an option with Pontus. That was not an option with the other faction. So maybe it's just cause like, yeah, just keep killing, these nuisances, I guess. Wow.
Though the Pontic monarch was busy dealing with the unrest in Asia, a formidable skill at organization allowed him to send a general known as Dorilaus at the head of another army into Greece. Both Appian and Plutarch give us a total manpower of 80,000 for this new invasion force. Given their previous spurious estimate of 120,000 for Archelaus' army, however, it is probably more reasonable to say that Dorilaus sailed into Chalcis with at most another 40,000. After his retreat from the pitched defeat on the plains near Chaeronea, Archelaus had reverted to war on a strategic scale. Using his vast superiority at sea, the general privateered his way up and down the Aegean and Adriatic seas, picking off Roman supply convoys, launching amphibious raids on enemy coastal bases, and even attacking the transports of Marian consul Lucius Valerius Flaccus as they attempted to cross from Italy.
Oh, wow.
Sulla, meanwhile, was facing the prospect of a 3-sided conflict at his expense. Replacement legions led by Flaccus, a subordinate of Cinna and representative of Sulla's worst rivals in Rome, had landed in Greece and were approaching from the north, while Archelaus and his newly reinforced army sat happily in Chalcis. Sulla began marching north into Thessaly, where he would deal with Cinna's bandit general.
Okay, so yeah, this is quite the precarious situation he finds himself, huh? He does not... Archelaus, I'm kind of impressed. He definitely isn't a idiot. He's adapting, and again, naval superiority, turning the script on Sulla, you know, was using the whole attack their supplies and whatnot, especially with the Athens stuff. Archelaus is doing that, but through the sea, enjoying his naval superiority, and seemingly now the ball is in his court. So definitely Sulla's in a precarious situation right here, and he's gonna have to deal with all fronts.
It halted at Melitea upon receiving word that the Pontics were on the march. With a reinforced army at their back, Dorilaus and some of the other commanders, as of yet unaccustomed to the quality of the Roman legions, pressed for another pitched battle, arguing that the paltry Roman force had no hope of opposing theirs. Archelaus urged caution, but when Dorilaus implied that the defeat at Chaeronea could only have been treachery to Mithridates, Archelaus quickly fell in line. The Pontic armies...
Yeah, this is a bad idea, giving him a battle. Archelaus definitely had the... I think this is gonna end horribly. I think Archelaus had the right mindset of sitting back, attacking the Romans through sea, and just, you know, being a bit more defensive in that way. So I think giving Sulla a way out through a pitched battle is probably I'm imagining it's gonna be a big undoing of them. And yeah, it's like when Julius Caesar was in Greece, and then after the battle of, what was it, Dyrrhachium? I forgot. But the point is, it's when him and Pompey's first clash, in which Pompey defeated him. Pompey's strategy was to now just starve out Julius Caesar, just chill out, wait, let Julius Caesar lose his strength. But then the Roman Senate kept pressuring Pompey to give Caesar a battle against Pompey's like advice. Pompey gave him Caesar the battle, then he lost at Pharsalus. So I think it was Pharsalus, right? I forgot. The point is, the situation's kind of reminding me of that, where, yeah, giving this guy a battle might just be what Sulla might need. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see, though.
Maneuvering back into Boeotia caught the attention of Sulla, who called off his march against Flaccus without hesitation in favor of doubling back on Archelaus. If the barbarians wanted another thrashing, they were welcome to have one. An initial skirmish near Tilphosium went in Sulla's favor, leading Dorilaeus to recant his aggression and argue in favor of Archelaus. However, when the cavalry-heavy Pontic army came to a brilliant plain near Orchomenus, it was Archelaus who, heartened by the favorable terrain, decided on a pitched battle.
Oh no.
They encamped in a strong position and waited until Sulla approached and did the same.
Yeah, I really think this is a bad idea. Now the roles have switched. Now it's Archelaus who might be leading himself to his doom. This is a bad idea. Again, I know that Sulla is responsible for driving Pontus out of Greece. I'm pretty sure that's how it goes, if my reading of the first war is correct. But I'm starting to kind of maybe see why that happened, if this be the battle that did it.
Another clash was inevitable. The Sullan army, victorious at Chaeronea the previous year, was arrayed in 3 lines of battle, each one interrupted by gaps which enemy charging units could be funneled through. Now, however, the proconsul acted with more subtlety. His forward ranks, the Antesignati, began drawing up with a denser frontage than those behind, but with more space between them and the lines to their rear, the Postsignati. Sulla had stakes driven into the ground in this extra space as a further obstacle.
Oh.
Cleverly utilizing the average legionary status as a half-engineer and builder, Sulla immediately set about nullifying Archelaus' cavalry advantage by digging 10-foot wide trenches along each wing. If completed, these makeshift barricades would render vast areas of the plain virtually inaccessible to the deadly Pontic cavalry, thereby protecting the flanks of Sulla's infantry-dependent army.
Dang.
Seeing the inherent advantage of open terrain disappearing right before his eyes at the hands of the Republican shovel, Archelaus hastily sent out his cavalry to attack the unprepared Romans in their thousands.
Okay, I could see. Very Julius Caesar-esque, or... Well, yeah, Sulla came before Caesar, but I made that comparison because, yeah, Julius Caesar loved his engineering. His whole thing was engineering. Though I will say, Julius Caesar was more of a wall builder. I think if this was Julius Caesar, he would have already built like a great wall by now. Okay, I'm joking around, but I'm starting to see why Sulla and Caesar are compared in some ways. And this is so smart because, you know, I think that the Romans at this point, in terms of infantry, are the greatest in the world. But their cavalry game is their biggest weakness. I don't think the Romans step up their cavalry until the crisis of the 3rd century under Emperor Gallienus, when he creates a giant, more mobile cavalry army. That's when I feel like the Romans stepped up their cavalry game. But before that, their main strength was their infantry. And again, battles that the Republic lost were because of infantry. Like, against Pyrrhus of Epirus, the Romans would lose the cavalry battles and then almost be threatened to be enveloped, forcing them to retreat despite their, legions actually standing up to the phalanx. And then you think of Hannibal Barca, the reason he was so successful in defeating the Romans was because of his superior cavalry. His Numidians would win the wing battles with the cavalry and then envelop. And then you think, even Antiochus the Great, like, of the Seleucid Empire in the Battle of Magnesia, he won. The Seleucids had the better cavalry, the cataphracts and whatnot, and he won his wing. Unfortunately, he didn't capitalize on that victory. But point is, what I'm saying is, yeah, early Rome, from the Republic even to a lot of the early Empire, their weakness or the way to defeat them was through cavalry, and so it's very smart. So I could see, like, on paper, yeah, I could see why Archelaus would want to give a battle. This is a great idea. You have this cavalry superiority, so you could, if you use it correctly, defeat the Romans, even if they have better infantry. But I love that Sulla has realized this as well, and immediately negated any cavalry advantage, like, or at least attempting to. That is smart, and I'm glad he realizes that. So, bravo, good sir. Bravo, Sulla.
They concentrated primarily on the trench diggers working to fortify the Roman wings, but their rapid mounted onrush panicked Sulla's half-formed soldiers to the brink of rout. All of a sudden, morale was shaky, and the general almost lost control. True to form, Sulla rose to the occasion and displayed the prodigious charisma for which he became famous. As the beleaguered infantry labor units in front began reaching a breaking point, especially on the left, their brilliant commander rose to aid them. Arriving on the scene, Sulla leapt from his horse and began pushing his way to the very forefront, with Rome's vaunted Aquila standard in hand. By that point, some of his men were attempting to flee towards the camp, and it was to them he bellowed forth, "For me, Romans, an honorable death here, but for you, when men ask you where you betrayed your commander, remember to tell them at Orchomenus."
Holy crap.
Sulla's personal presence and his words of accursed
My goodness. Sulla's like morale Viagra. Like, he just shows up and, like, his soldiers always rise to the occasion, you know what I mean? Like, his mere presence gives at least 100% boost to all morale in all the units. Like, he really is just morale Viagra. He could just show up and just instantly the morale skyrockets in all his troops. That's, again, his charisma is definitely something that is really surprising me.
shame rallied the routing units to renewed bravery. Furthermore, two unengaged cohorts from the right flank came to reinforce their general, together with most of Sulla's officers, who, fearing for their commander's safety, left their own units to join the fight. With fresh and steadied soldiers alike at his back, Sulla led a foot charge and managed to rout the Pontic cavalry. Perhaps as a reward for this speedy recovery, or simply to get them fueled for the rigors of further battle, Sulla used an intermission in the fighting to feed his legions breakfast. Gratefully, the men keenly began preparing entrenchments for a second time that day, only to be charged once more by cavalry and archers. The Pontic force fought hard, but the Romans fought harder. Counterattacking with gusto, the legionary cohorts closed with their enemy so quickly that the archers were unable to use their weapons effectively, while the Pontic cavalry simply could not match the Roman soldiery in a static fight. Archelaus' assault quickly stalled and was turned back with many losses, including that of his son Diogenes, who, according to Plutarch, fought gallantly and fell gloriously.
Dang.
The first day ended without victory for either side. In the morning, Archelaus led his own army out into the space between the camps, with cavalry on the wings, scythed chariots in the vanguard, and the Macedonian-style phalanx behind.
Again, like I said, the scythe chariots kind of worry me, dude. At this point in history, they kind of are a gimmick. You know, like, I don't remember hearing many battles where they actually are that decisive in victory. I could be wrong, but I think it kind of gives me Magnesia vibes, where they ended up being undoing of Antiochus and his left wing because they try to use these things and it backfired spectacularly. So I would almost be like, let's drop the chariots, but I guess we'll see. But yeah.
Still further behind the locked spear formation were the surviving slave soldiers from Chaeronea. Upon the Pontic general's order, his scythed chariots beelined straight for the first Roman line of Antisignati. As though dealing with such contraptions was standard routine for the veterans by this point,
Oh my
Sulla's
gosh.
vanguard units deftly maneuvered aside, allowing the speeding vehicles to barrel straight into the field of stakes behind them. Archelaus' chariot charge was finished before it even got a chance to truly begin. Roman javeliniers swarmed
We need to drop the chariots, guys. The scythe chariot is not gonna be decisive at any battle. Come on.
around the beset Pontics, putting an end to them quickly. Sulla's soldiers advanced rank upon rank, prepared to meet the forthcoming enemy. On the other side of the field, whilst marching his slower infantry onward in reply, Archelaus dispatched the cavalry to keep the Roman attention distracted and their formation shaky, so that they would be easy prey for a phalanx marching in inexorable lockstep.
I
The
see.
Roman general countered appropriately. Feeding his small quantity of cavalry through the established gaps, Sulla ordered his inferior quantity of horsemen to engage the galloping hordes of their enemy. They did so, suffering ferocious losses on both flanks, but succeeding in the objective of blocking Archelaus' charge before it hit the legions. As they were now static once more, the advancing legionaries were able to get a hold of and slaughter the Pontic cavalry, cutting through entire divisions as others fled in panic.
And you just lost your one chance of winning. The cavalry was the only way you were gonna win that battle. If it's an infantry versus infantry battle, the Romans will win. The Romans, I think, their infantry is unmatched at this point in history. The Legion, not even the Phalanx, can defeat them. So, yeah. Archelaus, he should just leave now, because an infantry fight isn't gonna... I don't see it working for him. I could be wrong, but yeah. His best chance was the cavalry, and he's lost that.
Worse still, this disaster happened so quickly that the phalanx hadn't been able to properly organize, allowing
Oh
the
my
Romans
gosh.
free rein on the pike bearers.
Oh my gosh.
Fortunately for them, however, Archelaus was chastened by previous events and ensured there remained a good line of retreat. When it became scathingly obvious that his infantry were in the process of being slaughtered, the Pontic commander withdrew his entire army back. Several thousands of his infantry were dead, but that was pittance when compared to double the amount of cavalry, perhaps reaching up to 10,000, although
My
less
goodness.
is probably more likely. The defeated remainder of Archelaus' army yet again took refuge in the camp, which was subsequently besieged and taken in a dogged fight. It was another brilliant Roman victory, but marred by the Romans' unwillingness to take prisoners and subsequent brutal massacre. Sulla had triumphed over a Pontic field army for the second time in as many years, but Archelaus managed to escape again. That particular detail didn't matter much, even serving to help the Triumphator's cause later.
My father grew up under Nazi occupation and a civil war. He taught me you can't.
All the same, Rome's foreign spectre in the form of Mithridates was appropriately culled, with the Pontic king now considering peace talks with Sulla. For Sulla, it was almost time to deal with the domestic issue, but the proconsul could not afford to turn on Cinna and his lackeys quite yet. He had diplomatic matters to conclude in Greece, and a hostile Roman army, led by the general Flaccus, to deal with. To that end, he wintered in Thessaly and prepared his legionaries to do battle with their kin and countrymen. While Sulla had been campaigning against Mithridates, the political situation back home had been heating up. Aristocratic Romans opposed to Marius and Cinna had begun fleeing the capital in great numbers, arriving at Sulla's camp of war as to a harbour of refuge, so much that the proconsul and the de facto Optimates leader had a virtual senate of his own in the east. Each of these eminent figures came with terrible news from home, a tale of persecution and injustice at the hands of political enemies. Sulla's properties and those of his allies were being burned, their supporters and friends slain, and the Republic reduced to base tyranny. Sulla vowed it would stop, and that all the guilty would pay. Meanwhile, before taking on the rogue and traitor Sulla, Flaccus's Kinnan army embarked on a ill-advised winter march through Thrace, in hopes of gaining a few morale-raising victories against Pontus. Flaccus was a politically appointed general only, and so was relatively incompetent. Crucially, however, he utterly refused to take the counsel of his appointed military veteran, Gaius Flavius Fimbria, into account. By the time Flaccus's hapless army reached the Hellespont, he was viewed with incredible hostility by both his army and his second-in-command. When Fimbria threatened to depart back to Rome, Flaccus had him replaced before leaving on some business. Predictably, Fimbria seized command of the army and had Flaccus's head lopped off when he returned, before throwing it into the sea. So it was that Fimbria became the principal Roman opponent Sulla would have to face here on out. While Flaccus was occupied bungling his army and his life away, Sulla was conducting diplomacy with the twice-beaten general Archelaus at Delium. Mithridates, reflecting on the vast losses suffered by his armies in the field so far, had sent Archelaus to extend an olive branch, but he wasn't doing so purely to surrender. The king was all too aware of Sulla's political predicament, that the proconsul was essentially just a dangerous rogue with a powerful army, and he attempted to take advantage of that fact. In the name of
Smart. And, Sulla would be kind of quick to make peace, right? I mean, he has other issues to worry about, so yeah, I guess make peace. It's almost like an offer, like, hey, you won't have to deal with me now, that'll free you up for other stuff. So, again, the Poison King's pretty shrewd in a way, if that's the angle he's going for, right?
an alliance and friendship with Sulla's father, Mithridates' commander offered his adversary what amounted to a blank check in money, ships, and mercenaries, so long as the Roman commander took those assets and went home, leaving Asia to its fate. With his customary wit, Sulla chimed back that it was truly unfortunate that it had taken 2 destroyed armies and tens of thousands of dead soldiers before Mithridates had remembered that they were friends. The implication of treason against his own republic appears to have angered Sulla a little, judging by his counteroffer. Advising the High Pontic general to look out for his own interests, and implying that Mithridates' crimes needn't be that of all Pontus, Sulla requested that Archelaus turn on his king and take the throne for himself. Then he could make amends with Rome as an ally of the Republic. Archelaus was predictably aghast at the notion, and made that known with a firm retort. Sulla then gave Archelaus a proper verbal thrashing in true Roman rhetorical style. If Archelaus, the slave who had fled like a frightened child after being roundly whipped in battle twice, would never betray his master, how dare he assume that Sulla, a Roman and a vaunted proconsul, would fall to such treacherous deeds?
My goodness, holy crap, the wit on this guy.
After this initial bit of obligatory chest-puffing showmanship, the proper negotiations began. Little evidence remains of the intricate details, but we know the eventual terms. Archelaus would hand over all his ships and get out of Greece. Mithridates was to vacate the unlawfully occupied areas of Asia Minor. Prisoners and deserters would be returned, and to put the cherry on top of the cake, 2,000 talents would be paid as a war indemnity. Some hard negotiation followed, during which Mithridates initially refused some of the terms, but was persuaded when Sulla threatened essentially to come over there and make him. During the entire process, Sulla took the subtle but incredibly intelligent step of keeping Archelaus close at hand, doting on the general and even caring for him when he became ill. This had the dual effect of generating unfavorable whispers of treason about Archelaus among the Pontic royal court, gradually weakening the link between Mithridates and his best general.
Wow.
On the other hand, he was still a powerful connection to the king, which Sulla could use. After a reasonably tense personal meeting with Mithridates, Sulla concluded the Peace of Dardanus on the terms he had proposed. According to the incensed Roman soldiers, however, these gentle terms against such a dastardly enemy of the Republic as Mithridates could not be countenanced. Charismatic as always, Sulla turned the situation back on his angry men by arguing that fighting both the Roman legion led by his political opponent Fimbria while continuing to fight Pontics would have been an impossible task. Sulla was, of course, only looking out for his men. Now that Pontus had been
Yeah, essentially just, that's smart, I'd say. You gotta kind of end this front. Like, he has enough issues and then fighting on both fronts. Very smart. And again, Sulla's diplomacy chops are some of the best I've seen on this channel. Like, the man mastered diplomacy. It's really amazing. I was not expecting so much diplomacy from this man, you know what I mean? But, yeah.
well and truly humbled, Sulla bounded through Asia to deal with Fimbria. It was a simple task. After a few days of hard marching, the Sullan army caught up with their Roman enemy near the Lydian city of Thyatira. The grizzled Marian commander initially mocked his Roman rival, but upon seeing the hopelessness of the situation, he escaped to Pergamon and committed suicide. For now, the war in Asia with Pontus and fellow Romans was over, and a relative lull descended. Sulla didn't take this as an opportunity to relax, however, instead spending the winter of 85 to 84 relentlessly gouging the wealthy Asian territories for as much as he could. When that was finished, the victorious general went back to Athens, a city which he had so recently treated with viciousness, and immersed himself in the culture. Although stricken by a bout of illness during his stay, Sulla found time to be inducted into the famous Eleusinian Mysteries and pilfer one of the city's great libraries. Taking a short rest across the straits, the general came across two fishermen from Hali, a city he had previously obliterated, who gave him a gift of high-quality fish. When Sulla realized their origin, he is said to have exclaimed in shock, "What? Is any man of Hali still alive?" The fishermen feared for their safety, mistaking his surprise for anger. But Sulla smiled with light-hearted grace and said that the men were fine representatives of their city. Still, the general had a great number of Romans in his entourage who were itching to get home and get revenge on the supporters of Marius, who had torched their homes and killed their families. Their eastern adventure couldn't last forever, and a reckoning was at hand. By autumn of 84 BC, Sulla and his thoroughly leveled up army of veteran killers were en route to Dyrrachium, one of the main embarkation points for transport across the Adriatic. Before the upcoming civil war, however, could even begin, Sulla discovered, rather anticlimactically, that the two Marian instigators, Cinna and Marius himself, were already dead.
Oh.
To set the stage for what came next, we must go back in time and outline events that took place in Italy between the time Sulla, disgraced and out-politicked in the aftermath of his consulship, left to war against Mithridates in 88 BC, and when his triumphant forces finally returned 5 years later. A period sometimes known as the Cinnan Republic. Typically cutthroat, late Roman legal maneuvering between Cinna and Sulla's allies started virtually the instant the latter departed, leading eventually to the exile of the former and the ignominious end of his consulship. Taking a page from Sulla's ruthless playbook, Cinna gathered Popularis allies to his side, bribing and enticing the army besieging Nola into following him. Buoyed by the support of Marius and luminaries such as the famous Quintus Sertorius, Cinna too marched on Rome in late 87 BC. Unlike Sulla's unprecedented but not overly brutal occupation of Rome not long before, the Popularis seizure of Rome in 87 provoked a veritable bloodletting among the Optimate faction. Among the scores of prominent Romans killed in the sorry episode were the wealthy Publius Licinius Crassus and his eldest son.
Nithya Raman will say anything to
Gosh
get
darn
elected
it.
first council candidate.
His second son, a certain Marcus Licinius Crassus, survived and escaped to the care of clients in Hispania, where he began raising a private army. Marius and Cinna took the consulships for themselves, rescinding Sulla's legislation, confiscating the proconsul's property and even endangering his family. By the skin of their teeth, Sulla's wife Metella and their children managed to get clear of hostile forces and escape to join him in Greece, together with a host of other displaced Optimates. So it was that an ideological divide was inflamed by violence and became a blood feud that could only be repaid in one way. When Sulla did return, it would be as a merciless vindicator. In the aftermath of the Purge of 87, an aging Gaius Marius, far beyond his martial prime, came to realize this terrible fact. Sooner or later, he would have to face Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a fearsome general at the very apex of his abilities, fresh from conquest. He was a setting sun and Sulla the rising sun. Sheer dread at the prospect finally collapsed the old general's resolve. He fell into alcoholism and only 17 days into his prophesied 7th consulship, died in 86 BC.
Yeah, talk about anticlimactic. Like I was ready for a showdown, even myself. I was like, there's only one way this can end, and that's with a battle. I was robbed. We were all robbed of it. But yeah, he saw the writing on the wall. He's like, holy crap, I'm old AF. I'm past my prime. Sulla's gonna come back here, like, emboldened, stronger than ever. He just gave up, essentially. Wow. All that just to fall there, huh? They're very anticlimactic, actually very disappointing, but I get he saw the writing on the wall, eh?
After this, Cinna firmly took the reins of the state and began raising forces, intent on meeting Sulla in Greece, so that Italy might be spared the horrors of a true civil war. Therefore, in 84 BC, Cinna began ferrying legions across the Adriatic, but a storm scattered the second convoy and provoked mutiny among the men already in Illyria. Cinna addressed them and attempted to force discipline, a tactless decision which led to his shameful death.
Oh my goodness.
The new de facto Popularis leader was Gnaeus Papirius Carbo, who recalled the troops and decided to fight it out in Italy. With the context of Cinna's republic established, it is high time to detail the distribution of relevant forces who will fight this first proper Roman civil war. The social war had technically been a fight of Romans against allies, while Sulla's first occupation of Rome was barely a conflict at all. But this upcoming clash between two diametrically opposed political factions was very, very different. Romans of senatorial rank would murder others of their kind in full-scale warfare for the first time.
Wow.
In spring of 83 BC.
So this is like the beginning of the Roman civil wars, huh? Like, these are the first proper, which would go on to plague them until the very end of the Byzantines. So, wow, this is quite a moment we're about to witness. This is the mother of all civil wars for the Romans. Huh.
At Dyrrhachium, the Optimates champion Sulla was ready to make his long-promised return to Italy. With him were 30,000 legionaries of the very highest quality, men with years of experience fighting as a cohesive, deadly force in war. Their pockets were also chock full of loot plundered from the war with Mithridates, prompting peerless loyalty to their beloved commander and vastly increased discipline. They had no need to loot Italy, they were already rich after all. 10,000 additional lower quality infantry reinforcements had been gathered from the Greek territories controlled by Rome, supplemented by a formidable strike force of 6,000 cavalry. This killer army was the rock-solid core of the Optimates' cause, but was not its only fighting strength. Among Sulla's coalition of the Republic's best elements, as they might call themselves, were influential aristocrats such as Metellus Pius, son of the consul whom Marius had humiliated and outshone decades earlier. Vengeful Crassus, who had lost his father and brother, was ready to march as well, armed with his family's wealth and a small army of around 3,000. The primary Popularis leaders in 83 BC were Carbo, Cinna's successor to the position of quasi-dictator of Rome, in addition to the two annual consuls, Scipio and Norbanus. Fighting a civil war in Italy gave a propaganda advantage to the populares, because, as Appian tells us, the actions of Sulla, who was marching against his country, seemed to be that of an enemy, while that of the consuls, even if they were working for themselves, was ostensibly the cause of the Republic. Even though we know in hindsight that Sulla will decisively win this war, it is important to realize that it was far from an easy fight. Scholars estimate the Kinnan manpower potential as being at least around 100,000, even though this potential had yet to be exploited. To begin doing so, both Scipio and Norbanus were in Campania, rallying the consular armies to face Sulla. Eager to get the show on the road, and likely pressured by many of his aristocratic supporters to do just that, Sulla and his army of conquest crossed from Dyrrhachium in 2 contingents, one of which landed at Tarentum, while the other, including among it himself, sought harbour at Brundisium. Likely a bit nervous at what he was about to do, Sulla got a bit of relief when the Brundisians didn't resist his landing, instead welcoming the general. In gratitude, residents of this faithful coastal city were granted exemption from the harbour tax. More than a gesture of simple thankfulness, however, this boon was almost certainly part of a wider propaganda campaign designed to show Italy that if towns and cities supported the Sullan cause, they would be richly rewarded. Whatever the case, 40,000 invading Roman troops were now on home soil. The 2 divisions linked up shortly after their arrival and began an inexorable march towards Campania, where the enemy armies were massing. Not only did Marcus Licinius Crassus join Sulla en route, but another total wildcard made his Machiavellian opening move in a political and military career that would eventually have him become Rome's most powerful man. Erupting from vast family estates in Picenium, a rising star in his early 20s named Gnaeus Pompey.
The man, the myth, the legend. Pompey Magnus. Yeah, I was already seeing, I believe, 2 of the first triumvirate members? That's pretty cool, just how close this was to, like, the Caesar, the time of Caesar, right? Like, basically the same lifetime. Holy crap, like, it's so cool to see all these familiar faces all popping up and kind of earning their marks, you know? Before they became the legends that they were.
Raised a small band of troops, as Cassius Dio called them, from his swathe of clients, as well as his father's die-hard veterans, and declared for Sulla. This opportunistic proclamation came after the young man had initially marched with Cinna during his doomed venture. After soundly beating Marian forces under Carbo, who subsequently arrived to stop him, Pompey arrived at Sulla's camp, where he was treated with incredible respect and declared Imperator. With these illustrious new friends, and many more flocking to his banner, Sulla advanced along the Via Appia until the army reached Cordium. Detouring, he then swept by Seticula and Calatia with a first true strategic objective firmly in sight, Capua. On his way, Sulla was able to forbid and enforce a complete ban on looting the Italian countryside. His cause was to be that of a heroic Roman liberator who meted out harsh justice to the guilty, but retained mercy for the innocent. Moreover, clemency might induce desertion from the enemy's cause, which was of course the prime motivator. Meanwhile, Norbanus and Scipio managed to get their greenhorn armies together and march to war themselves, directed by Carbo. Unsure which line of march Sulla would opt for, the consuls divided their formidable forces, with Norbanus taking a slightly larger force to block the Volturnus crossing on the crossroad between the Via Appia and Latina. Scipio took up a position further north, near the city of Taenum Sidicinum. The war was about to begin in earnest. When Sulla grasped that he was facing 2 divided armies rather than a single overwhelming one, the Optimate proconsul beelined down the road to Capua and straight at Norbanus, whose dedication to the Marian cause was more fervent than that of his consular colleague. His army, whose command structure included Marius's son, was also the more dangerous of the 2, being larger and subject to greater discipline. The 2 armies caught sight of one another when Sulla neared
Yeah, so it's Sulla like trying to divide and conquer now that he realizes there are two armies, trying to take them one after the other. Basically divide and conquer, right? Which could work out for him, in a really great way, I think, right? Better than just one overwhelming giant army.
Norbanus' position on the Volturnus. His spirits made optimistic by the support of so many prominent men of the Republic, Sulla sent emissaries in an attempt to bring the bristly consul over to the Optimate side and to avoid the slaughter of Romans. The proconsul's olive branch was snapped when Norbanus harmed the envoys, and a great battle became inevitable. On the rolling foothills of Mount Tifata, 40,000 Sullan troops met roughly 60,000 Marians, and crushed them with contemptuous ease, supposedly not even having to properly get in formation to do so.
Holy crap.
According to Plutarch, the veterans' enthusiasm and zeal for the melee was so great that they simply swept Norbanus' newly raised army away in a great rush.
Dang, but that also goes to show you, like, Sulla has veterans, hardened men of war. And it goes to show you just the quality of his troops who have been through warfare and are back as conquerors, right? That goes to show you just quality of his army. My goodness, it's like swatting away a fly right now. Like really so simple, just like that, huh?
Killing somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 men, whilst apparently only losing 70.
Wow.
Sulla himself
no way. Holy crap.
commented later that it was this moment that made him believe victory was probable. Until Tifata, Sulla had been secretly nervous that the soldiers might desert him and return to their homes, as was customary for legionaries all throughout the Republic. Victory against the bellicose consul only fired up the soldiers even further, making them all the more confident in final victory and solidly aligned to their great red-headed general. Although Norbanus managed to retreat behind the walls of Capua with most of his battered army, Sulla judged him to not be an immediate threat and turned north. It was Scipio's turn. Thundering up the Via Latina towards Taenum, Sulla's army met the Second Consular Army near its base, but didn't immediately go on the attack. Optimistic about the prospects of diplomacy with a more moderate leader, the proconsul put out feelers and managed to arrange talks with Scipio. Although the back-and-forth term talking was initially
Again, Sulla loves his diplomacy. He shines a lot. I think in some ways, don't get me wrong, on the battlefield he knows what he's doing. He is impressive. But I will say, I feel like his greater strength is in the diplomatic chair. Like, in the game of diplomacy, he's the master of it. So I think this is much more his element, even more so than the battlefield.
cordial enough, Scipio felt it only right and proper to inform his defeated co-consul what he was doing, and to seek his counsel. So he dispatched the most prominent Marian in the army, except for himself, to act as go-between. Unfortunately for Scipio, that man was another Roman legend, Quintus Sertorius, future guerrilla king of Hispania. Despising Sulla, Sertorius went on the consul's mission, but intentionally provoked a fight by capturing Suessa on the way, a town which had sided with the Optimates. Stunned, Scipio returned Sulla's hostages, and the armies prepared for battle.
Oh wow.
It was at this moment the proconsul sprang a trap which would become one of his most famous. Aware that the Scipione legions were far from secure in loyalty anyway, and furthermore blamed the consuls for breaking the armistice, Sulla had his own veteran soldiers strategically fraternize with the enemy during the entire duration of his parley with Scipio. What exactly the proconsul's troops said or did isn't known, but we can imagine them bringing extra rations to the Marian camp, along with a portion of their
Literally buying. That reminds me what Julius Caesar did in his Spain campaign, where he managed to defeat several Roman armies basically through just maneuvering and even winning them over. Like, hey, we're all Roman here, we all get along. I remember that in his campaigns during Spain. So this reminds me a lot of that, and very smart, just like getting them to like, hey, we're all cool, we're all cool. Hey, look at how much better Sulla is. he, our beloved ginger leader, bro. Like, he's so cool, and I'm assuming this is gonna cause mass defection. Again, Sola's smart, dude. I don't know what I was expecting when I walked into this series. Someone more bloody and brutal, probably with not as much charm or tact, but I am surprised. I have definitely a different picture of the man watching this series. Very smart man.
Eastern treasure, sharing both, and by doing so, championing their general's cause. This kind of interaction must have taken place around 1,000 campfires and in 100 grand tents. Rank-and-file soldiers were gradually convinced by argument, flattery, and thinly veiled bribery. In the upper echelons, sullen officers might have shared drinks with their adversarial counterparts, and were turned by promises of position and power. By the time Sulla drew up his army and advanced on Scipio's tent, the latter's authority rested on a foundation of sand. The consul had no idea.
Dang.
In a prearranged signal, 20 cohorts of Sulla's veterans saluted Scipio's encamped warriors in a greeting which was returned by a greeting of their own. Then, to the consul's utter disbelief, the entire army streamed out of the camp and flocked to join Sulla as if their minds had been enchanted. Thoroughly outmaneuvered, Scipio simply sat bemused in his tent until the Sullans came to get him. The consul was
You bring shame upon the name of Scipio, but dang, completely outplayed. Sulla, the master chess player, bro. Just amazing.
captured and dismissed by his enemy, unharmed. Still, a large part of Italy still supported the Marian cause against the invaders, and so Sulla was forced to keep his tact front and center. With Scipio appropriately dealt with, Sulla turned about and once again sent entreaties to Norbanus, probably aiming to repeat his sorcerer's trick. They failed once again, and the proconsul proclaimed his unstoppable advance on Capua. Unwilling to stand against Sulla there, the surviving consul abandoned the city and made his way to the Marian stronghold at Praeneste. A lull in the fighting followed, during which both factions took a breath, drew back, and prepared for the second round. Up until this point, Sulla had made an attempt at negotiating every time he had the chance. Rejected, it was this moment which saw the war descend into a bloodbath, justified by said rejections. By the end of the year 83 BC, Sulla and his legions had won many Italian cities to their cause as they continued their march to Capua. However, his Marian enemies were still strong, and a tense military standoff ensued, with both sides attempting to raise additional forces for the coming campaigns. A bitter winter also froze the respective armies in place, locking any movement down until the thaw of 82. When the year turned, elections took place in Rome and new consuls were elected. Somewhat predictably given the circumstances, Carbo and Marius the Younger were appointed to the position. Just as Caesar's hallowed name would serve as a potent weapon for Octavian decades later, elevating Gaius Marius's son to the consulship engendered a renewed burst of support from the Marian heartlands in Etruria and Umbria. There, the old general's name was still encased in gold, and his veterans consequently turned out in great numbers to support their revered commander's heir.
Okay, so he's mentioning this is where things are gonna start getting bloody now. I'm starting to kind of get the picture of why, because so far things have been going kind of very smoothly. I'm like waiting for the moment where it's like the bloodbath starts. I'm starting to see it right here, right?
It is important to point out that the main armies marching around Italy, despite their immense size, were not the be-all and end-all of the war. Regions and their cities may have predominantly leaned one way or the other, but all throughout the Roman heartland, bitter factional strife raged between pro- and anti-Sulla factions. A Sullan proponent in the Umbrian city of Ameria, for example, briefly managed to incite the people into supporting the invading general. but was cut down by unknown Marian assassins not long after. When the campaigning season of 82 BC began, Sulla sent Metellus and Pompey with an army north to confront Carbo at Ariminum, and to make a play for Cisalpine Gaul. At the river Acis, the Populares and Optimates met once more for battle, with 5 cohorts defecting over to the Optimates. The fight was fierce but rapid, as the main line of the Optimates was able to push the Populares back, allowing Pompey to then finish them off with a cavalry assault. At the same time, the proconsul continued his personal advance on Rome, and encountered a larger army under Marius the Younger at Sacriporto. Sulla had been attempting to reach Dolabella, whom he hoped would defect to his side, but Marius the Younger had hemmed his forces in by blockading the roads into Latium
Marius
with a force
Jr.
of 40,000 men. Sulla, however, was eager to break through the defense, having experienced a vision of Marius the Elder warning his son that he would suffer a great military disaster on that day.
Really?
However, his soldiers were exhausted, and a rain earlier in the day had waterlogged their equipment and the battlefield, prompting his tribunes to advise him to pitch camp instead and rest for the night. Sulla relented, and while his soldiers began digging defensive earthworks, Marius the Younger assaulted his position. However, when Sulla's men fought back, 5 cohorts and 2 cavalry alae defected to Sulla, prompting a collapse of Marius's forces and causing a rout. It is said that between 15 and 25,000 soldiers of the Populares were killed in a slaughter, breaking Marius's forces completely.
Yeah, they have to realize the writing's on the wall. The amount of people defecting to Sulla is increasing. So, it is like, he's basically winning everyone over so easily right now.
The defeated Marian commander and his shattered army ran for shelter to Praeneste, but Sulla pursued them so closely and fiercely that the Praenestians were forced to shut the gates before Marius himself could enter. In a hair-raising moment, the beleaguered general was hauled over the wall by a rope, while his men were captured or massacred against the fortifications. In a grim forecast of what was to come, Sulla had all the Samnites among them executed as rebels.
Oh
Devoured
boy.
by paranoia and fury at being humbled in such an embarrassing way, Marius the Younger sent grim orders to Rome that anyone suspected of loyalty to Sulla was to be killed. To that end, 4 prominent figures who had previously supported reconciliation with Sulla, including the Pontifex Maximus Mucius Scaevola, were slain as they tried to escape, further intensifying the bloody ideological nature of the war. Leaving a
Yeah, the violence is starting to rev up, I'm noticing.
small force to keep Marius at bay in Praeneste, Sulla split his main army into 2 distinct divisions and pushed north on Carbo. Sulla's group, traversing the Via Cassia toward Clusium, defeated an enemy cavalry force on the river Clanis. The second group, moving along the Via Clodia, continued on without incident and defeated enemy forces near Saturnia. The details of the battles of the river Clanis and Saturnia are fascinating, as they tell us about Carbo's strategy, stringing out small forces along the route to bog Sulla down with skirmishes as a delaying tactic. Meanwhile, Carbo himself was amassing an impressive force for battle, large enough that he could split off 8 legions to march south down the Via Flaminia to break the siege of Praeneste under his legate C. Marcius Censorinus. The proconsul himself then came to blows with the consul's main army near Clusium itself, but the grueling day-long battle had no clear winner. Elsewhere, the war was also going well for the Sullan cause. Metellus was able to craftily sail around the Marian strongpoint at Ariminum to advance on Cisalpine Gaul by Ravenna, and Optimate forces were sweeping their way across Sardinia. Pompey was marching against Carbo's blockading force under C. Carinus at Sens Gallicus and engaged them in battle. Losing 3,000 of his men, Carinus was forced to retreat to the city of Spoletium and requested reinforcements. Carbo's relief force, however, was quickly located and ambushed by Sulla, who slew 2,000 of them and routed the remainder. Having lost control of both the Via Cassia and Via Flaminia, Carbo was forced to make a bolder move, sending Censorinus and his legions on a rapid march to outflank Sulla and relieve Praeneste. Again, Sulla was able to locate the relief force and intercept it, ambushing them at a pass and then surrounding them on a nearby hilltop. Censorinus was quickly blamed by his men for leading them into disaster, and most of the army deserted, leaving him with a mere 7 cohorts in the end.
That's billionaire Tom Steyer, trying to sell voters that he's definitely not.
Dude, Sulla is like dominating so far, like, it almost feels one-sided, this whole conflict. Like, the way that so many are just turning to Sulla, and he's still winning, so far, I'm getting the vibe this is very one-sided. I'm not sure if that vibe's just gonna stay until the very end, because Kings and Generals did say that while he wins, it's not easy, but so far it seems easy to me. Like, I'm waiting if there's gonna be a moment where Solo's definitely gonna have to exert himself more, but so far, the man is dominating. Like, it seems like his enemies are floundering. That's the vibe I'm getting so far, guys. I guess we'll see, but I don't know, man. Doesn't seem too hard. Not what I would expect, you know?
Having lost a massive part of his forces, Carbo and Norbanus retreated north to deal with Metellus. At the Battle of Faventia, Carbo attempted a rapid march to reach and defeat Metellus before nightfall, arriving an hour before sundown. In their attempt to surprise Metellus, they had made their plans hastily and stumbled into thick vineyards, allowing Metellus to respond with greater care. Between 9 and 10,000 of Carbo's forces were slain, with another 6,000 deserting, and only 1,000 making it back to Ariminum intact. Upon hearing of this news, a legion of the Lucanians defected to Metellus, further bolstering his forces, while their commander, Albino Vanus, had managed to arrange a nasty assassination of all of Carbo and Norbanus' commanders in a feast, leaving the Populares leaderless and completely on the back foot. Norbanus chose this moment to
What a disaster, holy crap.
flee Italy and commit suicide, while Carbo desperately attempted once again to break the siege of Praeneste, only for his forces to be defeated once more at the Battle of Fidentia by Marcus Lucullus, brother of the more famous general of that name. At Fidentia, Lucullus had found himself severely outnumbered, with 18 cohorts facing nearly 50 loyal to Carbo and the Populares under Quinctius. Worse still, his men were short on arms and ammunition. However, a breeze blew flowers down from the mountains, which attached themselves to the men, forming the appearance of wreaths and garlands on the helmets and shields of his men. Taking this as an omen, and with morale soaring, Lucullus and his men attacked, breaking Quinctius' army and slaying 10 to 18,000 of them. Retreating back to Clusium, Carbo and his remaining army of 30,000 men once more engaged Pompey near the city, but allegedly 2/3 of his army was slaughtered in the battle. However, due to one of Sulla's previous sanctions, the proconsul himself was to be denied a decisive victory directly against Carbo, possibly triggered by the proconsul's wanton slaughter of Samnite prisoners after thrashing Marius before Praeneste. A fresh allied force of up to 70,000 Samnites and Lucanians burst from Samnium and went straight for the small force Sulla had ordered to keep the young consul in check. Disengaging from his campaign in Etruria, Sulla doubled back with blistering alacrity and managed to install his own army in a pass between the interlopers and Praeneste. The Italians attempted to break in, while Marius tried to break out. Both failed. But now the coalition army, which was under the command of a Samnite known as Pontius Telesinus, alongside M. Lamponius and Gutta, all survivors of the last social war, was in big trouble. It had Sulla in front, apparently unbreakable with his natural fortress, while dashing Pompey was swiftly following up behind, ready to crush the recalcitrant Italians from both sides. What Telesinus needed was a distraction to pull Sulla out from his position, and the Samnite leader had a very shiny one close by, abruptly breaking camp during the dark hours of October 31st of 82 BC.
Okay. I don't know, Solo's on top of his game, bro. Like, I don't think I've seen him duped or outmaneuvered or, you know, like, outwitted. I feel like he's just... Like I said, he's moving like Julius Caesar did when we were covering the Julius Caesar series. Just seldomly makes a mistake, is an iron wall of discipline and morale. It's like almost unbeatable, unstoppable. He's like an unstoppable force of nature. So, yeah, I'd be surprised if he gets the drop on Sulla or manages to deceive him. That would be like a rare moment for me. But so far, like, yeah, things are not going well for the anti-Sullan camp.
Telesinus' great army closed in on Rome itself, a
Oh.
city which was almost utterly undefended due to the ongoing conflict. After
Oh.
joining with some remnant Marian forces, this terrifying force arrived and encamped 1 mile outside the Eternal City's Colline Gate. A historian, senator, and soldier of the era, known as Velleius Paterculus, states that this was the most critical situation Rome had faced since Hannibal had camped just miles from the city after Cannae. He puts a speech in Telesinus' mouth in which he proclaims, "The last day is at hand for the Romans. These wolves that made such ravages on Italian liberty will never vanish until we have cut down the forest that harbors them." For the first time ever, a coalition of Rome's Italian neighbors were in a position to take the city, but Sulla, suddenly understanding the threat, was hurrying in order to stop them. Unwilling to chance assaulting the massive capital while a dangerous enemy army was on his heels, no matter how tempting it was, Telesinus restrained his forces and
I'll give it to Telesinus. He definitely moved out of his precarious situation of being sandwiched between Sulla and Pompey, but still though, like, I don't know, man. Like, if they're gonna have a pitched battle, I don't see Sulla's, like, veterans losing. This was a bold move, I'll say, and it definitely took the initiative away from Sulla. I will say that, because Sulla's scrambling to catch up, so he definitely sees the initiative, but I don't think he's gonna be able to actually, like, carry. We only have, like, 10 minutes left. Holy crap. How is this gonna end?
prepared to meet Sulla for the great final battle. It was so final because Carbo, defeated in the north by the other Optimate generals, had withdrawn to Sicily. This was it. A small force of young citizens sallied out of the city against Telesinus, but were repelled. Sending forward a squadron of several hundred cavalry to harry the attackers and make their onward movement sluggish, Sulla, rushing down the Via Praenestina, managed to get beyond the Samnite-led coalition army and encamped next to the Temple of Venus, just outside the Colline Gate at noon. If the enemy wanted to breach Rome, they would have to get past his veterans. Several of the proconsul's officers, noting the tiredness of the men and the lateness of the hour, advised their general to not attack. However, eager for battle and confident of victory, Sulla brought his standards to bear, arrayed his
Oh boy. How's this gonna... I don't know how Sulla dies, guys. Is there like another part to this series that I have not seen, or... Because I said, we only have 10 minutes left. How can this end? Like, I'm imagining, like, the way I'm thinking is like Sulla just wins and seizes power in Rome, but by the time of Caesar, Sulla ain't mentioned, so... What happens to him? I'm like, I'm a little confused at the moment. I'm just like, time's running out. I'm assuming he's gonna win. I know that he just mentioned how tired his troops are, and that is a big factor, but again, the discipline of these Roman legionaries it's kind of unmatched, so I could still see them pulling off a great win even if they are tired, so I don't know, man. It would be hilarious if the Samnite massacres were his undoing and these Samnites actually got him, but to my knowledge, the Samnites don't sack Rome. I mean, they did early in an earlier period, but I don't think now. Like I said, I don't know what's gonna happen, but let's watch. I don't know how this is gonna end.
troops and attacked regardless, initiating the battle in late afternoon. The
Okay.
right flank, led by Crassus, won victory with the ease to which the Sullans had become accustomed,
Alright, yeah.
driving their
yeah.
opposition all the way to Amtemne with massive losses.
Holy crap.
However, beset by fierce Samnite warriors and exhausted from the march, Sulla's own left flank collapsed under the pressure, and his men routed towards the gate, despite their commander's swashbuckling efforts at rallying them. However,
Oh wow. Sulla's this is kind of rare. Okay, wait. This might be the most precarious situation Sulla's found himself in yet. Sulla has always been the natural Viagra of his army. Like, his mere presence always raises the morale. He always gets them to rally. Is this like the first time this is just failing? Like, his charisma is finally not working? Whoa, this is a little shocking. Holy crap. Okay, Crassus is gonna have to turn around quickly and like hit them from the back if this is gonna be salvaged. Or maybe Sulla might be able to pull off one last bit of charisma and get these guys to fight and hold the ground, but yeah, this might be the most dangerous situation yet.
Roman veterans manning the walls dropped the portcullis in fear that the enemy might follow in after, blocking the line of retreat.
Okay, back to
Faced with
fighting.
resistance or death, Sulla's troops turned, fought, and in the early evening managed to turn the tide. As the
Alright.
great battle began winding down near the Colline Gate, messengers came to Sulla from Crassus, who had been separated from his leader at the start of the battle. Informed of the deaths of Telsius and Albinus, and the resulting triumph, the proconsul realized with some confusion that he had won the battle, and with it, the war. The brutality and deadliness of this battle was so great that 50,000 men apparently died within earshot of Rome that day.
Holy crap. Okay, that was the most frightening situation so far. That was like... That was a moment I was like, oh my gosh, is Sulla like going to lose? Like... Alright, rally. They managed to rally back, but I'll say that was definitely the closest call so far that we've seen from Sulla, right?
8,000 Samnite prisoners were also summarily executed. After his decisive triumph was confirmed, Sulla went to attend Crassus at Antemne, where a 30,000-strong segment of the besieged garrison, swollen by refugees from the clash at the Colline Gate,
That little piggy booked a villa.
Oh my gosh.
This little piggy booked a hotel.
This is the perfect pair for your iPhone, and it replaces 3 different chargers. So when I travel, I don't pack extra.
proceeded to beg the victorious proconsul for mercy. In his typically Vulpine manner, Sulla stated that he would grant them mercy, but only if they would do some mischief to his other enemies inside beforehand. They did so, desperately slaughtering thousands of their own allies and allowing the proconsul inside. It was a terrible mistake. They didn't realize the time for mercy or humanity was over. Disarmed and at the mercy of their conqueror, the remaining Samnite and Lucanian prisoners, about 6,000 in number, were marched into Rome and herded into the Villa Publica. As this was happening, Sulla summoned the Senate to the nearby Temple of Bellona and began orating to the august body of his deeds in the Mithridatic War and in the catastrophic civil war he had just won. The moment Sulla did begin to speak, however, a strange noise became audible. It might not have been overly distinguishable at first amid the hustle and bustle of the capital, but as the sounds multiplied, it was very clear to every sense.
I'm anxious right now, guys. Like, we have a few minutes, and by the time of Caesar, I don't remember Sulla being alive, so something's gonna happen. I, like, have a feeling, like, he won the war. This should be, like, the breathing. This should be where you get me? That this should be the feeling where everything's fine. But I'm not feeling like everything's fine. I don't know. I'm, like, freaking out right now. I'm like, how is this gonna end? Well, I guess only one way to find out, eh?
Senator what the noise was, terrified, agonized shrieking. Noticing the senatorial disquiet, Sulla simply said in calm and composed language that the senators ought to keep their attention firmly on him and not worry about what was going on outside.
I don't know, Sulla. They're screaming and shrieking. I don't think I would be chill. I'd be like, what the fudge is going on outside? I don't know, I'd be weirded out if the noise is growing and there's more screaming, but I guess he's just that calm and composed at the moment, huh?
It was, he said, only a matter of criminals being punished on his orders.
Oh, wait.
The cause of the noise wasn't clear enough. Sulla had penned the 6,000 prisoners from Antemne into a public building and just massacred them in earshot of the Senate as a warning.
Oh my gosh, okay, yeah, now I'm starting to see the brutal reputation he got later on. Okay, I'm starting to see it now. Now that he's won, he's just like... The clemency's kind of starting to fade. He's starting to kill. He's making examples out of people. Okay. I thought it was like someone was coming for the Senate building. I was like freaking out, but like, okay, this is Sulla's doing, okay.
After this, he went and addressed the people also. His message was stark. The guiltless needn't fear, but anybody who had been his enemy since Scipio's broken truce was essentially finished.
Oh boy.
Barely straining his muscles, Sulla marched on Praeneste and induced Marius the Younger to commit suicide before executing a great number of his troops. One account, probably more accurate, details how Sulla, now de facto dictator of Rome, split the townspeople into 3 groups: Roman, Samnite, and Praenestine. The latter categories were executed to the last man, while the Romans were treated to a verbal thrashing. They deserved to die horribly for the crimes they had committed, Sulla said, but nevertheless he spared them. Throughout the Italian peninsula, Sulla's supporters engaged in an overly vigorous mass slaying of their defeated enemies, leading one senator to plead with Sulla would he please confirm who he wanted saved and who he wanted dead. He did just that. The next morning, the dictator posted a list of 80 public enemies who could be killed with impunity, including Carbo, Norbanus, Scipio, and Sertorius. The morning after that, 220 additional names appeared. On the third day, about the same amount more. These were the famous proscription lists. Many Marian renegades were hunted down and their heads brought to Sulla.
Yeah, okay, now I finally understand why Sulla had such a bloody reputation before. Because so far, throughout the majority of the series, he was pretty chill. Like, he was pretty, like, okay, diplomatic, like, okay, let's settle things, you know. The moment he won this civil war and, like, he came back to Rome, he did a 180. He's, like, became ruthless. And just, like, I'm killing everybody. Yeah, the 180 switch, like, clemency and diplomacy are done. He's like, you're all dead. If you oppose me, you're gone. Okay, now I see it. Now I understand how we got here. Cause I was confused the majority of the series. I'm like, this guy's very chill. How did he get such a reputation, as I've heard? But now I see it.
But innocents also suffered under the predation of the dictator's agents. A certain Quintus Aurelius, a quiet but rich man whose role in the political struggle consisted of simply counseling with others, entered the forum one day to find his own name on the list.
Oh, boy.
Understanding the reason immediately, Aurelius exclaimed, "Woe is me, my Alban farm has informed against me." It is important to realize that these avarice-driven excesses were not Sulla's intention, although his brutal policy did enable them. However brutal his actual motivations may have been towards political enemies, they at least seem to have been driven by a greater good. When he discovered that Crassus had executed a man in Brutium purely to acquire the man's estate, Sulla cast the future triumvir out and forbade him from embarking on public business again. In a legislative capacity, Sulla redoubled his attack on the troublesome position of tribune, which he believed to be the toxic component in the Roman system. To remedy the situation, he both deprived the tribunes of any power to introduce new laws to the people, and also prevented any man who had occupied the tribunician rank from seeking any other magistracy. By doing this, he discouraged the perennially ambitious Roman political class from seeking the position in the first place. Along with his political massacring of the people's representative, Sulla also set about attempting to prevent any future attempt to do what he had so recently done as proconsul, lead a loyal army from the provinces into Italy and seize the Republic for himself. To do this, he made the maestus or treason laws more strict. Treasonous actions on the part of governors were now exactly defined. It was treasonous should a governor refuse to return from his province within 30 days of his successor's arrival, lead an army out of their province, or ward without the Senate's permission. On the home front, Sulla initiated the Lex Cornelia Annalis, solidifying the traditional structure of the cursus honorium. A politician was required to be 36 to be elected aedile, 39 for the praetorship, and 42 to serve as a consul. Another old law was brought back into full force, which stated that when a man held a specific office, he could not hold that office again until a decade had passed. These were just some of the many measures Sulla took as the wayward republic's guiding steward, its most notorious dictator. he acutely tweaked, duly modified, and dutifully restored institutions wherever he took issue. But it would be wrong to call these changes reforms. They were designed not to bring on a new age, as many reforms are, but to bring back a brilliant system which Sulla believed had degenerated and been taken down the wrong path. Once the dictator believed that all could be
Okay. I'm kind of fascinated by his mindset and what exactly he envisions for Rome. Obviously, there is self-preservation and all this, right? Like, he doesn't want what just happened to be done to him. But I'm like wondering what his thoughts are of the Roman system and if is an actual idea of like returning to, or as he sees it, a better time. That kind of fascinates me of what his mindset is, because he's very brutal all of a sudden, but he does seem to like kind of have some idea, or like maybe some type of idea of honor, or at least an idea of how things should go, like with the whole killing for money thing he doesn't like. So it's something like almost like, I don't think zeal is the word, but like there's some type of fervency goal that he's trying to create with Rome, with all of this. I'm interested in getting to know more what's going on in his head during this time.
done was done. In his service of maintaining Rome in its traditional form, he did as most Roman dictators did. In contrary to the eponymous power-mad tyrants of our modern age, Sulla relinquished his great power voluntarily and became a private citizen once more.
Oh wow!
Then, in an act which Cincinnatus would have been proud of, he took himself from the capital and retired to a luxurious villa near Puteoli.
Really?
There, Sulla Felix indulged in the noble pursuit of hunting and spent a great deal of time fishing in solitude. Indoors, he hosted many of the old theatre comrades with whom he had associated in the days before his prominence, lounging on couches, talking, swapping jokes, and drinking fine wines day after day. As he lived out the final years of his life in this most degenerate of ways, the former ruler of Rome also penned his memoirs, of which unfortunately only...
That's how it ends? That's not what I expected. He thought he fixed Rome, and he just left. He's like, I've done my work. I can chill now. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe like death, maybe not an assassination, but like this is like he won and he just dipped. He pulled off, or George Washington just stepping down from power, or rather, George Washington pulled a Sulla. But it's the idea of someone who can do whatever they want, right? Like I make the George Washington comparison because George Washington could have made the presidency of America however he wanted, but him stepping down after his 2 terms is something that a lot of people are inspired by and awestruck by, because like he could have gone for life, but he's like, no, I'm gonna go now. Like I have that exact same amazement but for Sulla now. He's like, I guess in his mind he saved Rome. He restored Rome to a traditional better time. And now he's just gonna enjoy his life. Just wow, he won. I watch so many of these videos about all these conquerors and military men, and they don't have happy endings. A lot of them have very tragic endings. Alexander dying young, Caesar getting stabbed, Hannibal, drinking poison, Napoleon being exiled and living in defeat until death. Like, a lot of these guys don't have happy endings. So just to see Sulla just go and party it up, like, I'm almost shocked. I was expecting something more tragic, something more... But... I must say, Sulla, you surprised me, my friend. You have amazed me.
fragments survive today. Gradually, given his repeated intense bouts of drinking and cohorting, Sulla's health began to decline. Although technically retired, he was still able to exercise power.
Okay.
In a final burst of energy, he ended a period of discord between the new colonists of Puteoli and some of the older inhabitants. A small time later, Sulla discovered that a magistrate known as Granius was withholding money destined for the treasury. After having this corrupt man brought into his presence, Sulla shouted that he be strangled, but suffered a hemorrhage in his anger and died the following morning in 78 BC. However pivotal this man was for the history of the Roman Republic and its future, it is perhaps one of the things he didn't do that was truly to have the longest lasting impact. During the dictatorship of Sulla, a number of noble supporters interceded on behalf of a young man whom the ruler wanted dead for refusing his wishes. Eventually relenting, Sulla is said to have remarked, "Very well then, you win, take him. But never forget that the man whom you want me to spare will one day prove the ruin of the party which you and I have so long defended. There are many
Is he talking about Julius Caesar?
Mariuses in this fellow. The fellow of whom Sulla spoke, whose life he so reluctantly spared, was one Gaius Julius Caesar."
Wow. He saw it coming. He's like, this guy's gonna be trouble. And boy, was he right. Wow. It's amazing at what he didn't do. I mean, granted, he did have power, but he seemed for the most part not just kind of chill by the end. Not like the hands-on dictator I expected. I'm sure he was involved and exercised his power, but for the most part, it seems like from this telling, he just chilled and then didn't kill Caesar. Like, I'm more amazed at what he didn't do. Yeah. Again, you have surprised me, Sulla. I mean, granted, though, yeah, dying of a rage-induced hemorrhage, I mean, not the most pleasant way to go, but he still went out in a much more preferable way compared to other historical, the previous historical people I just mentioned, so he won. Wow.
We have more videos on Roman history available exclusively for our members and patrons. Join them via the links in the description and pinned comment to watch more than 200 exclusive videos. We will have more videos on the Romans and many other historical...
So I think he's done. And that was an interesting series. I'm like... It was so cool not knowing what the fudge was going on, and then just seeing how that all ended. Like, the ending is what shocked me the most, but in a good way. Well, GG Sulla, bro. Like, yeah. People compared him to Caesar before Caesar, but I will say, he probably had a better end than Caesar. Like, Caesar got shanked by everyone. Like, Sulla, you know, for the most part, just won, and yeah, was the master of Rome there at the end, and just partied it up. Good on him. Good on him, bro.